republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, I'll announce that the Board of Commissioners has advertised a special Board of Commissioners budget meeting for Wednesday, November 30th at 7 p.m. By the end of tonight's meeting, we'll probably decide whether we need that meeting or not. But I just want to put that announcement out there. I also want to welcome Jennifer D. Stefano, who is the new Executive Assistant to the Board of the Township Manager. So thank you for coming on board, and welcome to Radnor Township. At this point, I'm going to open it up to public participation. Of course, tonight we'll be discussing budget, and you will have an opportunity during that public hearing to discuss budget items. But if you'd like to come up now and speak about something that's not related to that, you're welcome to do so, and you can speak about budget as well. But you will have another chance before we get into voting on the budget ordinance. So, public comment?
Good evening, Jim Schneller, St. David's. I am quite aware, yes, you're going to be looking at the budget tonight. As you know, I've often come here and emphasized the fact that smaller outlays add up. Tonight, in that vein, but also just out of a concern for what our township represents and what we are, as taxpayers, are supporting, I wanted to raise an objection to the fact that we're a member of ICLEI, otherwise known as Integrating Sustainable Development. I think that in the past 2 years, the past 12 months, the nature of this national organization has become quite evident to the American people. There is a burgeoning amount of information on the internet to the effect that this is an organization that is full speed ahead trying to implement Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is objected to by hundreds of millions, tens or if not hundreds of millions of Americans because of the fact they wish to implement a world government as opposed to America keeping its identity and keeping its democracy. I could literally go on for an hour, and it's a shame that we have to possibly assume that Mr. Schneller is trying to make a speech about something that's too far-flung for the commissioners to think about. But there are only 35 members of this organization between Delaware, New Jersey, Maryland, and us. Pennsylvania has 13 membership municipalities. They have nothing to do with population, and I'm hoping perhaps you could withdraw your membership. This has happened in the past year. Townships in Oklahoma and Maryland, to my short research, have withdrawn. I don't think that we as a people, no matter our background or our leanings, want to support world government, nor its implementation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Nicholas, Wayne, President, Radnor Athletic Association. I just want to comment on the budget includes a consolidated fee schedule. As you know, that schedule has a proposed fees in it that affect the community youth sports program, which I represent. It's a $10 fee per player, per participant, per season. We feel that fee is way too high for a permit fee. Typical permit fees in surrounding communities that we've contacted are about $100 to $150 per field per season for youth sports. There's no other park permit fees that are on a per person basis. As you know, the Radnor was selected as the best place to raise children, and part of that was the availability of things like parks and fields and community youth sports programs. The $35,000 that's in the budget that would come from those fees seems to be much higher than what other communities are paying for their community youth sports programs. Also, this fee did exist in the past as a maintenance fee. At that time, we had use of the school fields, and the school fields were part of what the fee was for. There's no agreement, as you know, for 2012 for the school properties, And so we have really just begun to have discussions with the school district about how we might be able to use their field without a joint agreement. If there's costs there, obviously that would add to our costs. And the $10 permit fee obviously wouldn't cover those facilities either. So we hope you'll have some discussion and reconsider this fee and put it in the ballpark, if you need a permit fee, to put it in the ballpark of what we see other communities use in the $100 to $150 range per season. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Sampson, President of Radnor Youth Lacrosse. I echo what Mr. Miklas said. I just point out that it was 2 years ago there was a fee. Last year there was no fee, but our program donated $10 per participant for the use of the field. So we paid the fee without it being there, and hopefully the programs would continue to help the township maintain these fields. We've offered, and I know the soccer club in the past has bought seed for certain fields and fertilizer. I think that's a better way to bridge some gaps. If you analyze a family of 3 children that play a sport in 3 seasons, that's $90 before they walk onto a field. And you can say, well, there's a lot of wealth in Radnor Township, but we're trying to spread the availability of recreational sports to all kids in the township, not just people can afford it. I have to provide equipment and free registration fees for kids who can't afford the equipment. The equipment can be over $250 in lacrosse. And now we add a $10 fee, or if we use a field once in the fall, theoretically we have another $10 fee per kid. And we're paying for the turf replacement. We pay $10 to the turf replacement fund every year to replace the turf on Enke Field when the carpet needs to be replaced. So I would echo Mr. Miklas's comments and urge the commissioners to look at, do a sampling of the number of families that have multiple sport athletes. I think you would find that there's a large number of children in this township who play at least 2, if not 3 sports where they'd be assessed a fee. Thank you.
Good evening. Mike Lahota from Wayne, and I'm here tonight as a member of the Radnor Soccer Club. Also want to echo what Bob Miklas and Peter Sampson have said. Also, just to change it just a slight bit, I know it's not on the agenda, but you said it's open forum, and just want to say that throughout the past 20 or 30 years, the community has worked well with the school district and the township. The grounds maintenance agreement, which has been around for 20 or 30 years, which is now, I guess, up for negotiation. I just would like to say that it has helped the children and the families of Wayne maintain a great community, athletic and otherwise, and I just hope that you would continue to consider, while it may need to be reworded, it may need to be revamped, to consider its merits and strongly consider that as you go forward with the rest of your budget and other concerns. Thank you.
Mike, could you spell your last name?
Lihota.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment, the Board of Commissioners met in executive session at the conclusion of the November 14th Board of Commissioners meeting. We also met just prior to this meeting tonight. Matters of litigation and personnel were discussed. All commissioners were present at both meetings. Next up, we have the approval of the minutes for the Board of Commissioners meeting November 14, 2011.
Move to be approved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Any public comment on the minutes of November 14th? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. I want to, I misspoke a minute ago. The November 28th meeting, Commissioner Mahoney was not present. That's tonight's meeting. Okay, at this point we have appointments for boards and commissions. Do I have a motion?
I'll move the appointment of Madeleine Ramos Saldivar to the Board of Health.
Second.
Okay, any board comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next up, we have committee reports under Personnel Administration. I have an announcement of board vacancies on the Park and Recreation Board and the Civil Service Commission. Please send letters of interest and resumes to Robert Zinkowski, Radnor Township, 301 Ivan Avenue, Wayne, Pennsylvania, 19087. At this point, no further report under Personnel Administration. Finance and Audit, Commissioner Higgins.
First item on the agenda is the schedule of bills payable identified as 2011-11B, grand total of $1,615,425.54. They've been approved by the department heads and are within the budget limits we approved. So I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Board comment? Public comment on 2011-11B. Saying none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2011-151, a settlement agreement with the Radnor Township School District pertaining to the school grounds maintenance agreement for 2009, 10, and 11. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Board comment?
I'm going to be recusing myself from this vote and any discussion that happens, if it does happen, because my husband's company sells to the school district.
Commissioner Schaefer's recusal is noted. Any other board comment on this item?
Just to clarify, because I did have one or two emails about this, this has nothing to do with the ongoing discussions we're having with the school district for the future. This is only on the 9, 10, and 11.
Yeah, it's a payment of $90,000 for 2010, $90,000 for 2011, and $90,000
9,
for 9, $90,000 for 10, and $20,000
180.
180. Plus, on top of that, we get $95,000 goes to us also that the school district is entitled to under the business occupational tax here in Radnor.
Okay. I'll just comment. Actually, do we have any, does staff want to comment on this item at all? Is there any? Okay. I'll just comment that this is something that we've been looking at for the last couple of years. Like Commissioner Nagel has stated, this is independent of what we'll do in the future. This is a settlement of fees that we are assessing the school district related to the maintenance of their property over the last 3 years. So I have no further comment. Public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0 with Commissioner Schaefer's recusal.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2011-152, establishing a new fund balance policy and a variety of different things. Bill, I'm going to need you to walk us through this one, because there was a lot of terminology in there.
Yes, sir. The GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, issues statements periodically. The one up for consideration tonight is their GASB statement number 54, which pertains to fund balance reporting and governmental fund type definitions. When the GASB comes out with their pronouncements, they attach to it implementation timetables for the various governments of different sizes. So for Radnor Township and our size, the implementation timetable dictates that if we so choose to implement their statement number 54 effective with 2011. So we worked with the township auditors, Larson Allen, who provided us with a draft outline of what the resolution should read in order to be compliant with the statement. From there, based on the township's current fund balance policy, which exists in the Administrative Code, Chapter 4410, which was adopted by the township back, I believe, in 2008, we worked with the auditors in marrying the language of the two together. And to paraphrase what the GASB's intention is with their fund balance changes that they require and which is included in this resolution tonight, basically they're just taking fund balance and giving specific definitions to different categories that we would have to take any fund balance we have at the end of the year after or during the audit and divide it up and put it into those different different categories. And then the policy that's in the resolution defines what each of those categories are. For practical purposes, what we did when we married what we already had to what the GASB is saying we need to implement, we kept the thresholds the same. Chapter 4410 of our current administrative code dictates that our target level of fund balance be 15% of revenues, with 12% kind of being the floor. We did change that to be 15% of expenditures, just because it seems to make more sense that a fund balance be tied to expenditures rather than revenues. But we kept the same target levels. The fund balance policy that exists today also has thresholds for like a ceiling, for example, and what could be done with fund balances that exceed that ceiling. So the resolution in front of the board tonight talks about, it keeps the same ceiling that we have now, which is 18%, I believe. But it takes it one step further in that it dictates what the priority is of what can be done with any excess fund balance above that. So I tried to keep that non-accountant speak, but that's basically what the intent is. And it would be effective with our 2011 financial statements and audit, which is scheduled to begin next month.
Bill, I have just a couple of questions. On the summary that you gave us, you said required aspects of their statement number 54. Are there any recommended aspects we're not picking up?
No, the one recommendation that the GASB makes, or that was included in their statement number 54, was that the government maintain no less than 1 or 2 months worth of activity in a fund balance, and we kept that same language in, which is pretty consistent with our target percentages anyway. So those two are aligned.
And that's what that's one of my questions. That's what this financial stabilization is. Isn't that really just cash on hand?
Yeah, in a literal sense,
Okay.
yeah, not in an accounting sense.
And again, you and I talked a few minutes before the meeting. There's one aspect of this that I guess in order to be compliant or consistent, we have to do it. But it's a little bit confusing because we're using the same terminology to mean two different things, because we call it fund balance here, but this isn't going to be the same fund balance on our annual operating plan, because this is on an accrual basis and our operating plan is on a cash basis. Did they require us to use the terminology fund balance here, or? Because I'm a little concerned that we're going to get ourselves confused over time.
Well, the confusion is in the two different methods of accounting. And the policy that's in this resolution tonight will mandate that upon the completion of the audited financial statements, the two be reconciled so that moving forward there is a consistent number, which right now we don't have. But this would actually become a policy, and it would require the manager to come to the board at the conclusion of the audit and report what those differences are, and then make sure they're within the thresholds that are built into the policy, and then what steps are necessary to make corrective action if it's below or if it's above the thresholds that are in there.
And how do you reconcile that with a budget that gets approved in December with an audit gets delivered in May, for argument's sake?
It would require an amendment to the budget. It would require an amendment to the budget.
And so your vision would be you'd essentially budget on the basis of the proposed fund balance policy here, and then if there's a difference when the audit comes back, we have to adjust.
That's it, exactly.
Thank you.
Move the approval of the resolution.
I have a couple questions as well. I'll go ahead and second, but I have some questions.
I seconded it.
First of all, the language in this is really convoluted. So I took out our prior fund balance policy statute and compared it. And that ordinance has two other sections to it. It has 4410, which you provided, but it also has 4411 and 4412. 4411 addresses non-recurring revenues, and 4412 is the pay-as-you-go capital funding, which set up it foresaw us spending our extra money certain ways and forbade us from spending it on other things. So my question to you is, does the content of the GASB version of this comport with what a prior board had determined how we would spend this excess? And I'm asking that because I found it really hard to figure out the difference between committed versus assigned versus restricted. And in this ordinance, it's, you can do certain things with committed, certain things with unassigned, and certain things with assigned. And the reason I ask all of this is because I would like to see us, and we'll have this discussion later when we talk about the budget, but I would like to see us earmark our excess money, our excess fund balance, whether it's committed or restricted or whatever we're calling it, toward our long-term debt, our long-term capital expenses, and our long-term debt is the wrong word, capital expenses and OPEB
Liabilities.
So I just want to make sure that this is not changing our ability to do that. And my worry especially is in the last section C3, it says, well, each different type of fund, whether it's committed or unassigned or assigned, you're allowed to do certain things with under this new policy. And I guess I just want to understand, so from 12 to 15%, that is assigned. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Okay, so then anything over 15% is what, committed? If we decide, if we have a resolution to earmark it?
That would be unrestricted.
Unrestricted.
The total of committed fund balance, assigned fund balance, I'm sorry, unassigned fund balance.
Unassigned, okay.
That's section 2F for those following.
And we could take anything over 15% that is unassigned, and we could earmark it towards OPEB liabilities or capital improvement under this?
Yes.
Okay. So under C3, then there's some language that only over 18% we can do the following things with, which sound a little bit like some of the things we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So is that limited to only over 18%, or can we start earmarking after 15%? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I see what you're saying. I could see how that could be confusing. I would argue that the policy says 15%, so anything over 15% would become
earmark.
the board's discretion.
Okay.
And that the 18% basically is saying you're over 18%, now you need to actually do something.
Okay.
The difference between the two could just remain in the general fund.
Bill, and Elaine, if you don't mind, the Administrative Code Section 4410 was by ordinance. We're still bound by that ordinance, by that section, 44-10. This resolution is adding language and definitions and also some additional provisions. Is that a good way to look at this?
Yeah, Mr. Rice and I spoke about that issue, and what we ultimately decided is that if the board went ahead and adopted this resolution tonight, we would actually put together the ordinance that would
delete 4410.
Oh.
I mean, this is designed to, my understanding from talking to Bill, this resolution, which is a lot more detailed than 4410, is designed to replace 4410.
And 4411 and 4412?
Just 4410,
Just 4410.
yes.
Okay, so do you feel comfortable that 4411 and 4412, the things that it says we can do and can't do, comport with what we're passing in this?
At this time, I do.
Okay.
I think 11 and 4410, 11 and 12 will be up for further discussion
Right,
as part of next year's plan discussions, but yes.
okay. And I also want to hear, you feel confident that under this new scheme, we can, after the 15% set aside or assignment or whatever we're calling it under this, we can earmark those funds towards our OPEB specifically and capital improvement fund. We
Yes.
could transfer those funds out into those by resolution.
By what,
Right.
the answer is yes. The
Okay.
method, I'll leave that up to Mr. Rice, but
Okay,
yes,
okay.
whether it be by
We
resolution
could do that anyway
ordinance,
by
or-
budgeting for that, right?
I'm sorry?
We could put money in the budget to do that if we wanted to.
Yes, but the actual movement of money probably should have its own separate action.
Just as a point of clarity, for those that are watching this discussion, the Board of Commissioners in 2008 passed an ordinance amending the administrative code, which had 3 provisions. One was that we needed to create an ordinance that required us to have a fund balance. And the point of that is to have cash on hand to bridge the gap between the liabilities that we see and the revenues that we see, because there are months of the year that we actually don't have any revenue. So we need to have money on hand. And some taxpayers will argue, why are you holding my money? That's my money. If you don't need it to spend, why would you hold it? Well, if we don't have the cash on hand, then we have to borrow the money on hand, the money to make that cash flow bridge. That used to cost us around $80,000 to $120,000 a year to borrow the money. The second thing the fund balance policy did was it said that you had to maintain a certain level between, say, 12% and 18%, but the goal would be 15%. Since that time, our auditors have asked us to actually set aside more cash in addition to the 15%, because they're saying that that may not be enough. So we're moving towards a slightly higher number, although not required to. It just allows us to go a little higher. However, once we exceed 18%, we will be required to use that money to either pay down debt, use it for capital expenses, but we're not to use it for operational expenses. So the point is, we're not to waste the money or spend it thinking we have extra cash. The point is to pay down liabilities, pay down debt, try to live within our means.
It also says you can carry it forward.
And we can carry it forward, but ideally, we want to use that money in excess of, say, 18% to actually pay down debt or use for capital purchases. But again, those decisions will come back to the board from time to time by the manager bringing them to us for approvals. And the history on this was that we were using money, like bond money, to pay for short life assets like police cars and small trucks. And I realized a couple years ago that we shouldn't be doing that. The GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, says you should never do that. So to counter that, to prevent that, you set cash aside so that if you need to buy a new truck or a new car or a new police car, you don't use borrowed money, you use the cash on hand. So again, I just wanted to make a point of clarity for everyone that's here and anyone that's listening at home.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
can I just add one quick thing to that?
Sure.
It's just to make sure that we clarify that we're not, that this will not undo any of that.
Right.
It'll, instead, these are amendments that are being recommended to us by the Government Accounting Standards Board to enhance what we already have.
That's right. This is amending well, at some point we will amend 44-10,
Yes.
but 44-11 and 12 are the other 2 components that I talked about.
Right.
And we'll also have to look at those. But this is to strengthen 44-10 and to give it more specifics and more tighter control and also better definitions that are compliant with GASB 54. I have no further comment. Any board comment? Any public comment? I have Commissioner Spengler moved on this. Commissioner Higgins was the second on this.
Yes.
Is that fair? Public comment? Sure, come on up.
Good evening. Philip Wilson, Wayne. This comment is it deals with the issue that Commissioner Schaefer brought up and also the budget. As a former member of the CBFAC, I'm pleased as punch to see where the direction of the budget's going in terms of its structure and its content. But Commissioner Schaefer brought up a key point, and in the budget, it outlines very clearly in the executive summary on pages 6 and 7 that there are items that are not included in the budget that are clearly not here and at some point in time will be. But I'd like to point out and ask, and I put this in a specific request to the township manager and the finance director, to try to address this before the next budget meeting, because there's a hole in the budget, and I'm not sure how big it is, and that's really dealing with the items that are outlined here on page 6 and 7, and that's the capital funding. How much is that? What do we see that's going? And I know that there's going to be a lot of work towards that, but I was hoping that we could get an idea of what the ballpark would be for these items. So it's the capital funding, the other post-employment benefits liability, the compensated absences liability, and the pension funding. And again, I understand that those numbers are not cast in stone by any means, but for the sake of looking at our general fund balance of $5 million some dollars, it would be nice to know what our liabilities are in those other areas, at least what's coming down the pike, so that we can understand what those monies would be for and how much we need to earmark for those in the future. So if that can be part of the conversation, either, I doubt it tonight, but if this ensues on Wednesday, if those numbers could be available or something to that effect, it would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. The Board of Commissioners will be meeting throughout the first quarter of next year to address these large unfunded liabilities that we're facing that are not part of the current budget. Right now we're doing what we call pay-as-you-go on OPEB, which is other post-employee benefits, and also pension liabilities. So we'll definitely be addressing that in a public forum and hopefully under special meetings in January.
Can I just add one little comment to that, and that is, even without knowing exactly what those numbers are, we know we need to fund them, and we know whatever we have left over to set aside this year isn't going to be enough. So even if we don't have the exact number of what we need set aside for capital, what we need for the post-employment benefits, we need to start setting aside the money and start making a dent. So, but I appreciate your comments on that.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2011-152, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Next item on the agenda is the introduction of ordinance 2011-26, the adoption of a final budget for fiscal year 2012 and establishing the real estate millage rate and sewer rent fees for 2012. I guess, Bob or Bill, I'm not exactly sure how you want to handle this, because what was actually put into the package was blank. So I know you said you want the department heads to come up and make an introduction, but I didn't know how you wanted to handle the rest of it.
Sure. If we could, we're pleased to, on behalf of the administration, we're respectfully submit the 2012 operating budget and our updated capital equipment and improvement plan for years 2012 through 2015 to the Board of Commissioners and the community. I want to first of all begin by thanking Bill White and all the department heads and the staff and all the staff of all the various departments for the hard work and effort that they put in to develop this budget that has been in the works for approximately 3 months prior to its submission here, taking into consideration a lot of the comments that were made last year during the budget process, as well as a lot of the discussion had at these meetings over the past year. As part of this, too, we've made sure that we had posted this out onto the Township website for everyone to look at, review, make comments to, suggestions as well. One of the things that I know that I hear at some various times here once we submit these, and just maybe make some clarification, if nothing more than on behalf of myself, is sometimes you hear that, well, the manager submits a budget at 10%. Hopefully, the board comes in at 5%. Maybe he gets 3% more than what it is. I just want to say on behalf of myself and the administration here, we don't do that. I think the community demands a lot more from its manager and from its administration not to go in with those types of really trying to go high and come low and then try to figure out where the manager is actually at, is to try to submit this with as much accuracy that we have and what we feel is needed. Next year will be a very difficult year, a big year for the Board of Commissioners as well, to provide the community and staff the direction in which the township will follow for years to come. As part of those discussions, and I thank for the tee-up on this one here, is there are a lot of difficult decisions to be made by the board relative to funding the long-term liabilities of the township, from pensions to the OPEB to debt to the unfunded separation pay for employees retiring over the next several years, and as well as addressing issues as police staffing, codes enforcement, which is property maintenance, student rental, housing enforcement, and follow up with those, as well as funding the various agencies that the township supports, from the fire departments, the library, the seniors, the arts center, the Surrey services, as well as a plan for capital equipment acquisition, replacement, as well as capital improvements that include all of our facilities as well, that we know, from restroom buildings in various areas of the community that are out in the parks, to improvements to the Willows Mansion, to the facilities, this building here as well. And again, making some very difficult decisions on how we move forward in those particular areas. As part of this overall process here too, we try to look at maintaining the excellent level of services that's provided to the community, not only from the township, but also the various agencies in which we submit funding to, which all make up what a quality of life is here in a community. As part of a lot of these decision-making process, there was a plan that was published and adopted by the board that follows by month, in which you'll be able to follow through, where all these discussions will take place, as well as adding on to the CB-FAC group, but CAR-FAC now, to make recommendations as well. So not only do you have public comment, you have a lot of the various agencies, the board, staff, and the public to be able to comment on these throughout the year. So actually, we will start beginning on the 2013 and beyond budgets, actually beginning in 2012, which is posted to the website, as well as the commissioners were submitted also proposed goals by the board, which are out there as well too, for the board to follow as well. So there's a lot of work to be done over the next 12 months. There's a lot of meeting time that needs to take place. We'll try to make sure that all these meetings are noticed well out in advance, so you're able to attend those meetings, as well as making sure these are all videotaped too as well, so that you can either watch them as they take place, or depending on the venue, that we get it taped and get it back up on either the website or on cable to be able to view these as well moving forward. What we have then is a presentation by each of the various departments as a summary of some of the activities they do. I'm going to turn it over here to Bill White to kind of step through just a high-level view here of the budget and some of the items there, Bill. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. If we could get the presentation pulled up on the screen, I'll get going. For my part of the presentation, I focused in on the executive summary portion of the township manager's recommended budget, just to go over the high-level numbers and talk about the global makeup of the township's finances, where we get our money from, what those dollars are then used for. Included as well as a quick discussion on what was proposed in the recommendation on the real estate tax adjustment. Okay, sorry, we got to switch this over. There we go. A quick discussion on what is proposed as a real estate tax adjustment for 2012, and then finally a quick look at the Act 511 revenues that the township receives and the benefit of having that in place. So the 2012 budget has three primary major assumptions, and as the manager touched on a moment ago, is maintain the excellent level of service. That was the primary focus that was directed to the department heads as we prepared the budget. The other component of this, of what was recommended, came out of the various discussions that took place with some of the citizen groups, township manager listening sessions, and various meetings that took place throughout the year, that any kind of tax adjustment be tied to some level of inflation. So what is proposed in the township manager's budget is an adjustment that is tied to the Philadelphia region CPI through October, which was the latest that's available, October 10 to October 11. And as has already been discussed, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail, there are several items not addressed in this budget in anticipation of the meetings that are scheduled to take place in the first quarter of next year to address some of the long-term issues that face the township operationally and financially. Starting with the proposed real estate tax adjustment, again, we link this to the October Philadelphia Regional CPI, which is noted on this table here. The CPI change over that year was 6.9 or 6.90, which equates to a 3.02 percentage change. That same percentage then was applied to our millage rate, which at 2011 millage rate is 3.6411. That adjustment then brings the millage rate up to 3.7511, or a 0.11 millage change. And if anyone's interested on the calculation to see how that would impact them specifically, if you know your assessed value, just divide that by 1,000 and multiply it by 0.11. The assessed values are determined by the county and given to the township. That is the source of information we then use for the billings for the real estate taxes. So that information is all available at the county's website if you're interested. One of the other items that's come up over the last year is the distribution of the residential piece of our real estate tax base. Again, taking the data from the county on the assessed values of the residential units here in the township, what we wanted to do, and we found this information interesting enough to share it tonight, is where the number of residential units fall in terms of assessed values. So what's along the horizontal axis is the assessed valuations, the range for Radnor Township properties, residential properties, and then the number of homes or residential units that fall within each of those categories. And as we could see, the overwhelming majority lie on the left-hand side of that histogram there, which is interesting because we talk about what impacts to average taxpayers, residential taxpayers, and this just provides a little bit more information on who the average residential taxpayers are. The average from the overall average is about 312,000, but as you can see, most of the properties fall below that amount. So applying what is the 3.02% millage, or the 0.11 mils increase, to that same information, basically what it this table here demonstrate what that equates to. So for 4,192 properties, which is representative of that first classification of assessed values, the increase would be about $18.39 for the full year, or about $1.53 on a monthly basis. Then each subsequent classification of assessed values, it calculates out what the average within that range, how that would be impacted. And it also shows the number of properties that fall within each of those ranges. So This might be useful, again, if you have a general idea of what your assessed value is, to find out, if approved at what was recommended, how much that would impact. Continuing on, it's important for everyone to understand that the township, the Radnor Township entity, is different than the Radnor Township School District, which is a totally different entity with a different set of elected officials, a different budget, a different taxing authority, as is, and the county's the third piece to that. So when you take a look at what we all pay on real estate taxes, this is how it gets divvied up. 70% to the school district, 17% to the county, and then the township is at 13%. And as we go through the remainder of this presentation tonight, our intention is to try to demonstrate, or not try to, but demonstrate what the township provides in terms of services for that 13%. For 2012, this table and graph demonstrates a breakout of the millage, the 3.7511 mills, broken out by the different classification of expenditures that we have. As you can see, the two biggest pieces of that pie are protection of persons and property, which is made up of police, fire contributions, and community development department, which is codes inspections and life safety inspections. And then public works is the other piece, which provide all of the municipal services and infrastructure items. And then the parks and recreation is not only the programming, but also the maintenance of all the township parks and recreational areas. Again, taking that same information and distributing the same expenditure classifications, which, by the way, those expenditure classifications are how we report on an audited basis under our general accepted accounting principles. It's consistent with what's in our audited financial statement. So that's where the titles and the classifications come from. That's not something that is specific or unique to Radnor. That is used amongst all local governments, generally speaking. We do have a couple nuances, but generally speaking, those are the classifications used. This takes an average, again, this is our average taxpayer, and it breaks their millage, what they pay in an annual real estate tax to the township, and demonstrates visually what they're getting for that investment. The one note I'll make on this is that this information does not count or does not account for any kind of revenue that is generated to offset. Once we have a better link between the two, we'll incorporate that in future years. But again, as you can see, the overwhelming majority of what we pay in real estate dollars are for protection of persons and property, public works. Looking at our expenditures, or how we allocate our resources across all funds, this is the distribution of that. Again, it's consistent, and our police chief and our public works director will go into a lot more detail about what those two biggest pieces of the pie are, and then our recreational programming director and the manager will go over ComDev in those two areas. And again, hopefully leave you with an idea of exactly what it is that you're getting for each of those pieces of the pie.
Bill, can you go back one slide? All right, protection to persons is the biggest bar here. Now go to the next slide. Public Works is a bigger slice of the pie. What's the difference between the two?
The difference between the two is that this applies to only the general fund, which is the only fund that we deposit real estate taxes into, which is tied to the millage rate. The aggregate incorporates liquid fuels that we get that is invested into the roads, which is about $500,000, and it factors in the monies that are spent in our other funds, which include capital, the Willows, park and open space, and everything else. That's a very good question, though. Taking the same information and just dividing it up a little bit differently into more of an object level of expenditure, this is the distribution in terms of how the township allocates its resources in terms of salaries, compensation, payroll liabilities, benefits, employee development, supplies, materials, contractual services, the fleet expenditures, which consist of the operation of the fleet, not the replacement of the fleet, in the other areas. Switching gears to where the township gets its resources from to be able to provide the services. If you look at this real quickly, there are basically three sections of this graph. There are the real estate taxes, the Act 511 enabling taxes, and then everything else, and are basically broken up into thirds. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the Act 511 enabling taxes, because I think, well, hopefully some of the other areas are a little bit more self-explanatory as to where those revenues are derived. But also to touch on the importance of the Act 511. This pie represents the 5 different pieces of the Act 511. With business privilege, mercantile, local services, and amusement are all business related, and then there's the realty transfer that is also generated. And again, these revenues represent about a third of the total aggregate revenues that we have to operate with per year, which has a direct impact on the real estate side, in that without the Act 511 revenues, assuming everything else is equal, which is an assumption, but that the average taxpayer today is at roughly $312,000 of assessed value, is paying about $1,171. Without the Act 511, that same, all things being equal, that real estate tax bill would be closer to $2,223. We included this in the presentation tonight just to demonstrate the importance of those revenues and how the residential component of our tax base benefits from having the diversity of that extra piece of the pie. So for my part, the 2012 budget overview summary, again, is tying the adjustment in real estate tax to the regional CPI. There is a balanced general fund budget, which means that there are enough resources to cover what we are budgeting on the expense side. We continue to be compliant with 4410, the fund balance policy that was in place when this was proposed. And we'll still be compliant. It's just be some more pieces that will have to be added once we incorporate the resolution that was adopted tonight on the fund balance. Again, the primary focus is maintaining the major municipal services for 2012. There is an expansion of rental housing enforcement on the community development side, and excluding some of the major items that are scheduled for discussion in the early parts of 2012. And I think we're going to switch gears now.
Sure. And being that one of our codes people will not be able to make it here this evening, I will step in for them and step through this portion for them for the local codes. Yeah. Jim, if we can just go back, I'll take the codes one, and then we can switch to the other departments. All right. For an introduction, we hope to, at the next meeting, to be able to have in front of the Board of Commissioners for confirmation a new Community Development Director, which should be on the agenda for the December 5th meeting, as well as the current staff members we have. Under Community Development, we also have a health officer. And just to show some of the qualifications for our health officer, of some of the certifications and requirements that are necessary here to be able to fulfill this responsibility, but also not only within the area of his responsibility right now, but also does assist us in various property maintenance inspections as well. Currently, under his responsibilities, license approximately 186 food establishments on an annual basis. does plan reviews for approximately 15 to 25 commercial kitchens annually, which are either change-outs or new ones that are added to the township here. License and inspect approximately 35 public bathing facilities, or better known as pools, in which he does those. 10 of those operate on a year-round basis, 20 to 25 of those on a seasonal basis. Responds to approximately 115 health-related issues. That could be anywhere from West Nile to quarantine animals, property maintenance, or issues within a residential facility that requires his inspection. Could be if there's an issue of mold that he would want to do the inspections on that as well. And again, that follows the same thing with the rental housing inspections as well. Also serves as a liaison to the Board of Health and support to other different areas. Again, 186 licenses that are issued on an annual basis. Food inspections, approximately 260. Those are going back to some in which there may have been a violation that had been issued on there to be able to follow up. And temporary events, again, the 35 pools. Also does about 120 follow-up random inspections, either on a schedule basis or those that are driven by complaint. In addition to that, he also reviews, as is required, for laboratory results to be submitted for him to review as well, in which actually the pool is required to actually submit a sample to a certified lab in which he will review those results to make sure that the pool is in compliant as well. Addressing animal-related issues, about 40 to 50 of those per year, and special events. And again, that may vary from year to year as well. And will also participate in helping out with some property maintenance inspections. Regards to our code officials, again, a number of qualifications and certifications that they carry here as well. And again, on the international side too as well, which we're very pleased that they carry these responsibilities as well as being able to maintain those certifications. I'm just looking at the workload of that department. Just on the code officials, approximately 1,800 permits are completed on an annual basis, about 2,000 building-related inspections, and that's either by request, where a resident actually comes in and submits for a permit, or those that are based on a complaint in which they will go out to. Schedule approximately 1,300 meetings with architects, builders, and residents and staff to be able to step through a lot of the different plans that are being submitted. Also serves as a liaison to the Historical Architectural Review Board, Design Review Board, rental housing and implementation committees. Also serve as our emergency management situations on a 24/7. It came into play this year regarding Hurricane Irene with a number of buildings that were impacted due to the storm, as well as addressing and resolving approximately 200 complaints that come in. And again, a majority of those are either students or trash complaints or grass issues that are addressed. Looking at the permits that are issued in comparison here from 2003 to 2011. 2011, we were running ahead of the pace of 2010. 2006 was a high number again at the height of the economy and what was taking place. Based on the complaints that are logged per year, we're slightly behind, but again, based on the staffing levels that we currently have, some of those are not just based on time or not being logged in, which we want to try to get them to log more of those complaints in. A lot of those in which they're just following up with the resident and asking them to be in compliance and not actually logging those in. In regards to the rental housing license inspections, there are approximately 3,325 rental units throughout the township. And those, again, issue with permits for those. 156 second notice letters, 75 final notice letters. Again, include 45 citation letters that are issued and 25 rental complaint letters. Again, there's a lot of work that's taken place. Are we maintaining the inspections that we need to do on a regular basis? No, we aren't. And again, that's just based on the workload and the level of staffing that we have had. Hence the inclusion into the budget to hire additional inspector within that area. In regards to our administrative assistants, in which they handle approximately 1,831 building-related permits on an annual basis. 1,200 contractors licenses, 180 food licenses, the rental housing letters, again, for the pools, those letters that are generated there, providing the support for the boards and preparing the packets for the various members, publishing of legal notices, as well as making sure that the monthly reports for the County Board of Assessment, which are actually the property transfers that take place, and again, a lot of the work that they do. One area of note, which we're going to incorporate in that we have missed in our right to know area, is they do approximately 1,200 right to know requests on an annual basis. That's in addition to the 500 plus that we have logged in the past based on not actually logging these in. So you have about 1,200 that come in on an annual basis of people that want to request information, if their permits, what has been submitted to archives, going back and trying to track information down for residents when they come in, or if it's a contractor as well, scanning of documents, and as well answering a number of phone calls and emails, which approximately, I think the phone calls are around 300 per week and about 100 emails. And those are just approximate, just based on those responses. Now, police department is, or Parks and Rec.
Good evening, I'm Tammy Cohen, Director of Recreation for the Recreation and Community Programming Department. We are now the Recreation and Community Programming Department, so although we assist with many of the park projects, we don't directly oversee those projects or the maintenance as a result of the township reorganization, which happened quite a few months ago. Our department is basically comprised of these 4 people. Our newly hired in October program coordinator, Tiffany Heilman, Leah McVeigh, our administrative assistant, who's been with us for over 19 years, and Katie Diamond, who is our current programming assistant part-time person. Tiffany, myself, and Leah are all full-time staff members. Katie is a current part-time member working for our department. The 4 of us oversee the Willows Mansion staff, our part-time seasonal staff, contracted vendors and instructors, community and program volunteers who run our excess of 200 programs throughout the course of a year. These people are essentially about 400 people over the course of the year, and they do change annually, so we do oversee that management and hiring process on an annual basis for many of those folks. And we do run a seasonal, sometimes we only get them twice a year, but internship program. Moving on to take a look at our major areas of service and concentration for the department. We're comprised of these 8 major areas: programming, our marketing, sponsorships and partnerships, department development and special projects, parks and facilities, again, from more of an administrative and operational standpoint, and of course assisting public works and project development. Our committees and boards, working with committees and boards, community support, and then our front desk time that we have, as well as our departmental support that we have at our customer service window. As an overall breakdown of these areas, essentially, our programming, our marketing, and our sponsorship areas could all arguably be lumped in together. They make up the biggest part of our pie, approximately about 70% combined. This area, of course, includes, as I had mentioned, over 200 programs that we offer annually, and events ranging from all ages, gamut of types. We do sports programs, nature programs, education programs, creative arts programs, trips. We also have a discount ticket program, and essentially we're touching about 6,000 participants annually. As I mentioned before, staffing and coordination in the hiring process, of course, would fall underneath this programming area. Facility coordination with over 10 local schools, public and private. Our equipment management and supplies management, event presence, program presence. We do go out and we actually attend a lot of our programs, and of course we're at all of our events, the setup for those events, and then overall the administration of those programs and events, the registration, the record keeping in terms of keeping track of purchase orders and registration receipts that come in. We also conduct background checks on an annual basis on all of our staff. And of course, with some of the vendors that we work with, our contract development and putting those together. The marketing area, although it's primarily relative to programming, we do market our facilities. We try to put out information on Radnor Activity Center, the Willows Mansion, all of the parks. So that does encompass more than just the programming area. Also within there, we are in charge of publication development of a recreational brochure that goes out 3 times a year, 24+ pages. And it also is online. And we average about 2,000 views per season when those go up. We also have regular distribution of flyers and publications throughout town that we put together. We actually draft them ourselves. We put them together. We make the copies. The Township newsletter, that portion we generally take up about 8 pages within it that we assemble ourselves. That would be going out on a schedule 4 times annually. As many of you know, you've received it. 10,000 plus households, 2,000 plus businesses, and of course online, averaging over 3,000 views. We also put out a department e-communication every month, a recreational newsletter blast that goes out to 2,000 plus recipients. We maintain all of our own portions of the website, inclusive of the parks areas and the facilities areas. We film on a monthly basis for our Radnor 411 area, and we maintain all the park kiosks that are located throughout the park system. We also have a significant amount of outreach and coordination with a lot of other organizations. With the 10, 12-plus organizations that we work with throughout Radnor, there's a lot of cross-promotional opportunities, and we certainly take advantage of those with them as they do with us. So we work together on those endeavors. Sponsorships and partnerships are a new area for us. So whereas that makes up a small piece of our pie currently, we will hope that over the course of the next year to 2 years, we're going to see that grow commensurately, of course. And that's inclusive of focus on our existing events, new events. We had policy that we recently developed, and with regards to the events, there's specific planning with regards to sponsorships that go into that, the same way as they do with different partnerships that we have relative to various programs. It includes soliciting sponsors, working with businesses, working with organizations, having meetings to discuss opportunities, and then developing formal agreements and documentation that goes along with each one of those. Our department development and special projects accounts for about 8% of what we do. That's an evaluation overall of who we are. Who are we? What are we doing? Developing the tools that we need in order to establish and major our data. That's been a big one for us in the last year, is understanding who we are and what we do. How many registrations are we taking in? How many fields are we managing? Those types of things. And then that way we can manage it. We can actually understand what we're doing and then try to manage what we're doing. So we've also, over the course of the year, we've been evaluating our processes. How can we develop and deliver better quality and efficiency to the community? For instance, we're currently exploring online registrations. That's one area that's been a major focus for us. We've also reviewed our number of facility agreements, registration forms that go along with our facilities and our operations with our attorney to basically increase safety, reduce liability, understand what we're doing, how can we do it better. So basically, essentially adding structure to our policy that helps us with with the organization of what we're doing, better decision making, and of course, better customer service delivery. Special projects, planning grand openings, working on township park projects, special projects, our planning and our reporting, weekly, monthly, and then special reports as needed. That all falls within that department development and special project area. Parks and facilities, as I had mentioned, we once were known as Parks and Recreation, essentially. I know we still are in many areas of the budget and other areas of our functionality, but essentially we're the administration and the operations of the facility. So although we work closely with Public Works on different projects and understanding functionality, what would work best in our facilities, essentially we're operating the facilities. And what that means is Combined with our parks and our facilities, our athletic fields, it's over 60 facilities that we manage. Essentially with the RAC, the Radnor Activity Center, it's over 3,000 hours a year that we've scheduled, over 60 users, plus our own programming. Our athletic fields at 15 locations, currently inclusive of the school district, 24,000 hours of time, and 22 user groups essentially. Our picnic areas, we have 7 of those, over 50 users annually, over 200 hours of time. And then with the Willows and our other facilities combined, we're looking at essentially 30,000 plus hours of time that our department is behind. Committees and boards make up a little bit of a smaller percentage, about 4% of our time. I do work very closely with the Parks and Recreation Board in communications and updates, agenda development, and things of that nature. We also, our department program coordinator sits on the internal Township Safety Committee. I also have a seat on the Wayne Senior Center Board, and then of course we work with the Township Board of Commissioners. And also there's a number of subcommittees of the Parks and Recreation Board, such as the Trails Committee, the Marketing Committee, and the Facilities Committee. Community support is about 2.5%. What that includes is support and coordinating for area organizations to help them out with their events. That includes our civic organizations, our sports organizations. We've assisted in the development of many of their events, such as their races, park cleanups, annual events. We also coordinate a Scout Project, Eagle Scout Project program, and as I had mentioned, various park cleanups throughout the course of the year. Our department administrative assistant also sits at the front desk to assist the other departments in welcoming visitors as they come into the township. She also serves as a member at the customer service window. Here when you walk over to our department area for community development and engineering, by looking at the chart there, it's another small, very small percentage, about 1.5% essentially of what we do.
Tammy, can you go back for 1 second? This is where you spend your money, right?
This is our total operating budget. So
this is where you spend your money?
Yes. And this comprises this takes into account our entire operating budget.
Can you walk me through, confused by sponsorships and partnerships being on?
That's the time that we spend. So essentially.
I got you. So you're keeping track of how you allocate people's time and allocating, okay, got it.
When we prepared for this, we went through and did an assessment essentially with all of the percentage of time in terms of where we're spending our different areas as a department and compiled those, and essentially this is what this looks like relative to our basically our financial composition of our 2012 operating budget. So essentially this does include our 3 full-time staff members and our 1 part-time staff members, whereas last year that would not have been the case. Our program coordinator was an open position for over a year. Now, essentially, this slide represents the sources of our revenue. As I mentioned, we have a huge assortment of programs, trips, camps, and activities that we deliver year-round. And this is the income, essentially, that's generated from each of those items. So where you see this piece of the pie here, which is obviously the largest, in basically getting back our program coordinator this year, the goal is to see this area continue to rise, because essentially we've been without a staff person throughout much of part of 2010 and almost all of 2011. So PZO Gym is on there as programming revenue separately. That is also inclusive of our rentals and our birthday party program that we run at that facility. New programming that you see here is essentially what we anticipate in 2012 as a result of getting that program coordinator position back into our staff lineup. Sponsorship income as a cash value, that does not include in-kind donations, in-kind contributions that we get from area businesses and organizations that we work with, so that's only the monetary value presently. We also have a new discount ticket program that we hope to debut in 2012 that's included there. And essentially new fees upon potential adoption of the fee schedule for 2012, this would take into consideration some of those new fees that you see listed in the consolidated fee schedule. Just to take a look a little bit at sort of what have we begun to do? What did we start in 2011? Where are we headed? Take a look at what we're doing essentially. We've seen increased organization of our procedures and our policies. So basically, as I mentioned before, adding structure to what we're doing so it can help with our decision making. The administration of programming is one area where we've seen that happen. We've taken a much more heartily look at getting our vendors and our groups that we work with to sign liability waivers, provide us with certificates of liability insurance, basically to decrease our liability in working with those groups. Obtaining, as I mentioned before, obtaining instructor waivers, things of that nature, things that we never, I don't want to say we never did before, but we didn't do it as closely. We now have a process, we have a policy that we step through in order to conduct the administration of the programming. Reviewing and refining basically our general registration policies and general policies such as athletic field usage, which we've been developing over the course of the last several months, and then of course our sponsorship policy, which we recently approved. So overall, gaining more consistency and reliability for the community and enabling us to provide better customer service. Daily delivery of our services and our data management through technology. That's been a big one for us, is really making sure that we're taking a solid look of the information that we have that's coming in terms of registration information, registration data. We're logging it. Unfortunately, we currently don't have a database that manages that, but we're being as creative as we can with Excel. So it's given us an ability to be able to report with what we're doing. And part of it is just taking the time for the staff to generate a better knowledge of the programs in order to be able to do that. I mean the software programs. We're also, as I mentioned, exploring online registration, smartphone application development. Again, greater convenience and customer service is what we're looking at. Facility management and developing a system for tracking our usage and our usage hours. We spent a lot of time in 2011 essentially putting together a field management system in Excel to record the schedules that are coordinated with the many users, as I had mentioned, throughout the community. And we now actually have a system to log those hours that automatically generates a report to tell us exactly how many usage hours and by user or user group what that looks like. This is data that we've never had before, so this has been a major accomplishment for us. It's enabled more efficiency, of course, better understanding, and increased utilization of the fields. They're a hot commodity, as everyone knows, and it's just helped us really be able to maximize the usage. So essentially it helps increase safety too, because we know who's where, and it helps us boost the communications with the groups and all of the users. So essentially, understanding our utilization has really helped us maximize what we're able to do there. Increased development and programming and event opportunities for the community, and development of a broader base ability to deliver programs and opportunities and events. We've actually seen, just do a quick slide here, we've seen our number of events increase just from 2010 to 2011 alone. And again, that was without a program coordinator. We did create new events such as our spring extravaganza. We did a partnership activity and event with the Wayne Senior Center, the Active Aging Celebration. We did a new Halloween event, which was an open trick-or-treat here at the Township building, and also a foul shooting contest, basketball free throws recently, just this past Saturday. So we've been able to explore and try and do new things, offer things to a broader base, that they're not just specific and program and age restricted related, but more things for the broader base of the community essentially. We've seen lower cancellations as well. In 2010 we had 26 cancellations of programming, and that's inclusive of sessions and events and everything across the board. In 2011 we only saw 14, so that was a good accomplishment for us. So in looking at moving forward, again, just checking out the slide here, we would hope, in terms of our planning that we've done in a preliminary sense, that we can essentially build up to about 13 community events in 2012. And this does not include the Radnor Run, just for the record. This is things like the Arbor Day celebration, the Radnor Summer Concert Series, things like that. Let me go back. Maintaining a steady income and participation base, and then try and increase that, of course, on the near term. Revenue has been steady. Participation has been steady over the years at approximately 6,000 plus. Just to take a quick look at that. Essentially what this chart shows you is the bottom area that's in light blue essentially comprises the participation base of our department. That's stacked on the top is essentially the community sports programs. So that's Radnor Girls Lacrosse, Boys Lacrosse, the soccer club, and Radnor Wayne Little League, which is t-ball, softball, and baseball. So I thought that was good to point out, although we don't register and administer those programs with the community sports programs, they are a big part of us because we coordinate where they are. But you can see the difference there. So essentially, in 2008 and 2009, we did see peak years, which we did feel that was the height of the economy for us. And then we did see a little bit of a reduction into 2010. And then 2011, that is a projected amount. It is down. The number of programs have essentially been down. And again, that's been a result of not having that program coordinator position for approximately a year and a half. So you can see those as an illustration there. And to point out, this does include Radnor Activity Center programs. This does not include any events that take place at the Willows Mansion. It does not include the Radnor Run, which, as we know, is 1,000 people, but that is an event that's kind of led more directly by the American Lung Association. It also doesn't include the many people who use our facilities that we coordinate through the local organizations and the local schools that rent the athletic field. So it doesn't include those folks, and it certainly does not include as well the numbers that are a little harder for us to understand, and that's the unstructured usage that happens in our parks. The folks that they go and they walk the trail, or they go out and they catch the ball, a father and a son at a local park. Those obviously are very difficult to capture. So just moving, let me move back to some of our reflections. Essentially, like I had mentioned, maintaining steady income and participation base, increasing partnerships and sponsorships, major area of focus. Just real quick on that. Our total number of sponsorships, and this is both monetary and in-kind, we've seen those grow, not only just from 2010 to 2011, but based on our planning so far, we will see those again for 2012. Maximizing resources for the best benefit of the community, major goal of ours, and we've been working towards that in many ways. Improving our communications with the community through creative endeavors, not only circulating paper and publications, but actually getting out and speaking at the schools, meeting with the PTO officers, things like that. We've been doing a lot more of those things over the course of 2011, working with our partnership organizations. That certainly helps us boost our exposure. And then, of course, including members of the community. So for event development, for example, including people throughout the town to help us develop what we're doing. And then finally, just overall quality of life services and impact. That's our department's concentration, trying to build our presence within the community and maintain it as a portal for better quality of life through opportunities that improve health, staying active, increasing community spirit, all through the benefits of what we do. And that's the conclusion of recreation and community programming. Now over to police.
Good evening, Commissioners, and good evening, fellow neighbors. This first slide, I'm very proud of this because with the permission of the Township Manager, the men and women of the Radnor Township Police Department designed that patch, and that is going to be on the new uniforms coming in 2012. This is just a general breakdown of the police department and where we're staffed. Of course, in my office, you have myself and my administrative staff that consists of a administrative lieutenant, a corporal that's in charge of special projects and other assignments such as hiring and training. And I'll get into that in just a second. And then I have 3 civilian administrative personnel. We have the patrol division, detectives, and traffic safety. This slide indicates there's a formula out there from the International Association of Chiefs of Police that if you go by this formula and it's based on population, terrain, square miles, calls for service, types of service, it indicates the recommended number of officers an area should have. Based on the IACP's recommendations, we project that the Radnor Police Department should be approximately 56 officers. Back in 1993, we did have a staffing of 50. We currently have a staffing of 39. The red indicates where we're short. Hopefully in 2013, we'll be able to boost those numbers up. This slide indicates the number of officers we have that are eligible to retire in 2012. You'll see 5/5. The 5 top officers can leave right now in 2012. The other 5 can leave with a limited pension. You can see that number in 2013 goes up to 6. The current Fraternal Order of Police bargaining contract does expire at the end of 2012, so 2013 will be a negotiating year, and we do anticipate losing 6 officers that year. This is where the money is spent in the Radnor Township Police Department. Approximately 12.37% of the budget goes towards administrative functions. That's when you come into the window to pay a ticket, unfortunately, or to sign up for some type of vacant house check or whatever. That's my administrative staff that will assist you. Patrol is the bulk of where we spend our money. That's 68.42%. Traffic safety is close to 10%, and detectives are about 9.5% of the budget. Looking at this pie here, again, just what we talked about. It shows the patrol is the main function, as it should be. They're the men and women out there that operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, keeping you safe. And when we talk about patrol, that is our marked police units. We also have a couple of unmarked officers out there. We also have another unit that's going to be utilized specifically for motor vehicle enforcement that does not have any markings that would indicate that it's a police vehicle, but you would know when it was behind you, trust me. We respond to incidents. We respond to approximately 1,000 radio calls per month. The initial police contact with the citizens usually starts with the uniform officers, as you know. Patrol division consists of 24 officers, 3 corporals, 4 sergeants, and it accounts for over 68% of the budget. Their activities range from directed activities to patrol to traffic and to incidents. The incidents would be the 911 calls. Directed patrol would be anything from vacant house checks, bank checks, school visits, or selective enforcement. If they have an area where the community lets us know that there is a problem regarding people speeding, stop signs, things like that, that will be selected enforcement, and it goes under directed patrol. Our detective unit investigates all Part 1 crimes. A Part 1 crime, just to give you 30 seconds or less, the FBI came up with something called the Uniform Crime Reporting Index, and they classify crimes whether they're Part 1 crimes or Part 2 crimes. The detectives investigate Part 1 crimes. That's anything from a murder, robbery, rape, aggravated assault, burglary, car theft, or arson endangering persons. They also do crime scene processing. They're responsible for any interviews and interrogations. They do in-depth police investigations. Many times patrol, they are the first responders. They will start the initial investigation, and then it gets turned over to our detective division. We currently have 3 detectives and 1 sergeant in that unit, and again, that's approximately 10% of our budget. Again, that pie chart just demonstrates where their activities divvy up. Evidence duties, investigative duties, miscellaneous, could be anything from people coming in to get fingerprinted, records checks, things like that. And administrative duties are case file management, getting ready for court, and so on. I'm not going to go through every bullet point because we'll be here all night, but you could see that detectives have numerous investigative duties that they're responsible for. and that goes well too with the administrative duties that you can see. Same thing with the evidence duties. And they're very taxed because you have 3 detectives and 1 supervisor, and they're responsible for everything you see on these bullet points here. Traffic safety. First and foremost, it says on the chart here, the first bullet is obviously the most important. They investigate all serious and fatal crashes. They conduct daily speed checks in the township. They're responsible for motor carrier enforcement. That's when you see that, that van we have outside. Sometimes it's parked on Lancaster Avenue, and they'll pull over those 18-wheelers and they'll weigh them and make sure they're in compliance. They conduct numerous reports on traffic studies. I was telling one of the commissioners before the meeting tonight, and the township manager is very aware of this. We get approximately 12 requests for traffic studies per month, and the unit is dwindled down to 2 officers and 1 supervisor. So they're trying to do all this in addition to the traffic studies. Parking enforcement. In addition to the parking enforcement, we have 2 civilian meter/ordinance enforcement officers. The reason there's a slash there, we have 1 full-time meter enforcement officer, and we have an ordinance enforcement officer that also fills in sometimes as a parking meter enforcement officer. And it again, that accounts for almost 10% of our budget. Again, this pie chart just demonstrates where the traffic safety unit's time is spent, and you see speed enforcement is 50% of their duties, as it should be. The ordinance enforcement officer in the next slide, you can see he's responsible for animal follow-up calls, repairs and maintenance. That is, repairs and maintenance usually of the meters, parking tickets. TNP stands for temporary no parking, and meter bags. Sometimes people can pay in advance and have a bag placed over a meter so they can park there for the remainder of the day. Crossings and auditing. And finally, you can see the meter enforcement officer's duties, and the bulk of that is parking enforcement. The biggest issue we're facing that the township manager is working on is when we have to renegotiate the contract, or I'm sorry, renegotiate's not the correct terminology, to negotiate a new contract for our police officers in 2013. They are getting a 3% raise in 2012 because that was negotiated under a 4-year contract a couple of years ago, and that is the last year of this contract. And that is it, and I'm open for any questions if the commissioners or any residents have any. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Steve Norsini, your Director of Public Works, and we're here to talk about the Public Works and Engineering Departments. Sorry about that. Who we are. We are the Public Works and Engineering Departments, here to serve the residents of Radnor Township. We're the township staff you most often see or interact with. Pardon me on that. What do we do? Leaf collection, trash collection, traffic signals, snow plowing, sewer, and quite a bit more. What's our mission? To provide the residents of Radnor Township with municipal services that they expect and deserve, and to enhance their quality of life. Our goal is to provide those services in a knowledgeable, dedicated, courteous fashion as efficiently as possible. The public works services we provide are divided into 6 divisions: solid waste, highway and streets, park maintenance, fleet maintenance, sewer, and facility maintenance. Solid waste. This group does the residential trash collection at all township residential properties, recycling, brush pickup, the open stops for large items. The solid waste folks also assist in snow plowing and leaf collection and roadside cleanup. Highway and streets. Maintain and repair storm sewers and inlets, streets, street signs and regulatory signs, traffic signals, street lights, pavement markings. These folks, one of their main duties is also the leaf collection and snow removal, as well as responding to severe weather events such as Hurricane Irene and other tropical storms. Parks maintenance. Mrs. Cohen alluded to this. The Public Works Departments, through the Parks Maintenance Division, is responsible for maintaining all townships' parks, the open space and parks facilities, which includes things like turf mowing, aerating, fertilizing, baseball field grooming, safety inspections, tree removal, and we also use these folks for tree removal of trees in township right-of-ways, as well as when we have a large storm and we have a lot of trees coming down. These are the folks that are in doing it. Maintenance and repair of park and recreation facilities such as the Radnor Trail, the Sulpizio Gymnasium, the Willows Mansion and Willows Cottage, as well as the comfort stations. Fleet maintenance. This group maintains and repairs all vehicles in the township fleet. That includes the police, public works, parks, and all other departments, as well as our fuel system compliance system and tracking system. Sanitary sewer. Maintains the sanitary sewer lines, the pumping stations, the PA one-call markouts. They update the township sewer map. They, too, assist in leaf collection and in snow removal. And they're the folks that come out in the middle of the night for a sewer stoppage. Facility maintenance. He performs the custodial services at the township buildings as well as snow removal. In 2011, the Radnor Township reorganization, the engineering department was merged into the Public Works Department. By using a contract engineer in conjunction with the Director of Public Works, cost savings were obtained and efficiencies increased. Many tasks are accomplished by this new grouping. The engineering department works together with the Public Works personnel on many issues, specifically capital projects, sanitary sewer, resident concerns, stormwater, traffic, subdivision land development, and this group also works hand in hand with all the other departments within the township, including recreation, the traffic squad, codes and finance, as well as outside agencies such as PennDOT, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Radnor Haverford Marple Sewer Authority. Furthermore, on the engineering side, the engineering group deals with many processes that directly affect our residents regarding construction and development in the township. Subdivision land development applications and reviews, liaison to the planning and shade tree commissions, our road opening permits and grading permits. We respond to many resident concerns and phone calls, as well as many construction inspections. A snapshot of the portion of the budget that corresponds to the services Public Works provides the citizenry of Radnor Township with is as follows. Maintenance of 90 miles of streets, plowing and salting of those 90 miles, as well as the state streets, maintenance of the storm sewer, inlets, leaf collection for all residential properties, trash, brush, and recycling, maintenance of 370 acres of township park, the maintenance and repair of the township vehicles, as well as maintenance and repair of sewer pumping stations and sewer lines. As you can see, Public Works is very much part of maintenance and repair. We also perform many capital projects, such as the resurfacing program, sanitary sewer and storm sewer, and as well as facility projects, and traffic signals and street lights. The Public Works Department staffing levels have been reduced greatly since 2006, about 25% reduction. That gives us some challenges. So the Public Works Department staff has been reduced considerably, but the core services are still being delivered due to increased efficiencies and the dedication of our staff. The services that have been deferred over time due to staffing levels are curb repair and replacement, tree removal and pruning, reactive approach to potholes, planning bed maintenance, and projects and tasks outside the normal maintenance and repair. So what that really means is we are geared to delivering our core services at this point, but anything outside of that, we're really not staffed to do. It becomes problematic. Lack of funding defers planned replacement and/or upgrades of certain infrastructure, such as traffic signals and modifications to traffic signals, replacement of existing streetlight fixtures, and inlet replacement. What you can't see can hurt you. Infrastructure needs an assessment. A lot of our infrastructure is underground. You don't see it. You turn your water on, it goes down a drain, and that's pretty much what everybody, that's the end of it for them. Our storm sewer, it's aging. We have flooding issues that need to be addressed. The sanitary sewer, portions of the system are over 100 years old. We have pump stations that need to be upgraded or replaced. We have inflow and infiltration that must be addressed. And we're working on 5-year plans in that effort. Lastly, planning is the key. There's no doubt about it. Capital planning is important in determining current and future needs and in communicating these recommendations to the Board of Commissioners, the manager, the residents, and staff. By providing such planning, determinations can be made regarding implementation and funding. The Public Works Department will be preparing 5-year capital plans for the following: vehicle purchases, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, traffic signals, township-owned buildings, facilities, parks facilities, as well as the paving and resurfacing program. And open to any questions from the board.
Well, I want to thank Bob Zinkowski and Bill White and Tammy Cohen, Bill Colorillo, and Steve Norsini for all the hard work they put into this presentation to educate us, so we have a better understanding of how you run the township, how the township work gets done, and why it costs what it does. And I appreciate it because not only do we have a really well put together budget this year, but we have additional information that backs up the numbers. It isn't just a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. We actually have facts and figures to look at. So I want to thank all staff for all your hard work. I know this was above and beyond what you do on a daily basis, so thank you on behalf of the Board of Commissioners. That said, yeah. So at this point, I'd like to move, in order to have public discussion, we have to have a motion and a second on the table that allow the board to discuss and then allow public comment. So I'll move to introduce ordinance 2011-26, adopting the final budget for the fiscal year 2012 and establishing the township real estate millage rate and sewer rent fees for 2012. Do I have a second on that motion?
Well, I don't think you can do it that way. You don't have
No, you have
numbers.
to put a number in.
Okay. The sorry about that. Yeah, Bill, give us the recommended number, the millage rate increase and the sewer rent increase.
As recommended, the Section 2 millage rate would be 3.7511 mils, and the Section 3 sewer rent per 1,000 gallons would be $5.74.
Okay. So my motion will include a 3.7511
Bill, you said
mil.
574. I thought the paperwork said 576. Did I misread it?
For the paper, it's a rounding. I would go with 574 on how you do the 3.02%. So,
Okay, my motion is to approve ordinance 2011-26 with a 3.7511 mil increase in the tax millage rate and with a $5.74 per 1,000 gallon charge for sewage.
No, I don't think it's an
Increase. It's the millage rate.
I'm sorry, yeah, it's setting the millage rate at 3.7511.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'll open up to board discussion, and I just want to make a comment. I want to thank all the public that are here tonight. I know it's been an hour or so since we started this discussion, an hour and a half. If you don't mind, we'll just make a few comments, and we'll hear from the public. So, board comment.
Mr. Fisher, this is introduction tonight, not adoption or approval. It's introduction, then it would be advertised.
That's right.
For your December 12th meeting.
Yeah, my motion is to introduce ordinance 2011-26. Thank you. Board comment.
I have a question for Bill or Bob. The memo of November 18th, is that out and available for the public?
it was submitted to the website, yes.
Sitting on the table at the back.
I'm not sure if it's available. I can pull it up on the, we can have it pulled up on the screen.
And that might be helpful to, so folks can see the options we have here.
I don't think it was on the website.
Commissioner Higgins is referring to an alternate plan of no tax increase that was presented to the board as an option. But presently on the table, we have a motion to adopt at the 3.75 mils and the $5.74.
It is actually on the website. It is.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, it's-
Any board comment?
Yeah, I'll start. So regarding the inspector, I see the need for that, but my preference would be that we take the position that we had created for the liaison to the business district and we shift that over and either delay or dovetail such that we could see savings there. I mean, ultimately, what I want to get to is a 0% or no tax increase. I think we could give some thought to picking one of the parcels that's on the CB-FAC list, selling that. I know that that's not easy to do, but I think it can be done, or we don't know that it can't be done. But we could generate savings from that and use those savings to fund one of the items that's in the memo that Bill White gave us for the land evaluation. I think we could reduce our snow over time. I think we could we could reestablish some of the contributions that we made in previous years, not full contribution. I also think we could generate some revenue from the fee schedule. We have we have cost increases 3% by contract, and some of those costs are because of the things that we do in the fee schedule. So it's appropriate, in my opinion, it's appropriate to have increases in the fee schedule to reflect the added costs that we have as a township to incur the services that we're providing. I have a question about the $166,000 for the new officer. That officer wouldn't start January 1st, correct? So consequently, there would be a delay before we would have to start paying that. Is that right, Bob?
I think that would be correct.
So it's budgeted as 166, but we really wouldn't see. I mean, how long does it take to hire an officer?
Approximately 3 months.
So there would be some savings there, something on a handful of tens of thousands of dollars, just by reflecting the timing of the hire, if we choose to do it. So my discomfort is we're coming off 2 tax increases, a total of 20%. We're asking for more. We're not addressing some of the most pressing matters. We may need this 3% next year to address the pressing matters. And then even if we were to choose to, if we got down to 1%, we could add the 1 officer. Less than 1%, we could add the 1 officer and not have a 3% increase. So in sum, I'd like to see us at 0. I think we can get to 0. And the main way I think that we would do that is by substituting the inspector position for the liaison position.
I can support this as it is. In fact, I was kind of shocked that it was as low as it was, given some of the discussions we've had tonight about OPEB and some of the unfunded liabilities we have out there. If we start looking at these minor changes, they'll save us something, but I know in my ward that there's a real desire for the rental housing inspector. And I also believe, given what we were shown tonight about the large volume of money we bring in from Act 511, that bringing that community liaison position on sooner rather than later is a better approach. If we do also, quite frankly, I'm not convinced the economy is not necessarily going to go in the tank again. So some of our projections for income could be high. So anyway, I support this the way it is. I don't see any need to make changes.
Well, I have a few issues that I want to bring up for discussion tonight. But as far as bringing it down to 0% and offsetting, paying for some of these expenses, the rental inspector, through a one-time sale of an asset, I think that's just colossally unwise. If you're going to take on a recurring expense like a salary, you have to have a recurring revenue source to pay for it. So I don't think that's a good idea. The issues that I wanted to get out and discuss are, first, the field maintenance fee that we have added into the fee structure. I think that's something that I'm uncomfortable having that in this budget. I would like to suggest that we take it out. at this point. We haven't discussed it. We've heard from some people tonight that this is not a good idea, and I know that it was proposed before and perhaps even passed it at one point before. However, the landscape of how our youth sports are going to function going forward is very unclear. We have now, we don't have a field maintenance agreement with the school district. We don't know what they're going to be required to pay to the school if we're not involved. And underlying all of this is the fact that, you know, these groups, these youth sports organizations, are actually providing a service that we would have to provide if they didn't exist. So I don't want to be put in the position where we're charging them fees, then they also have to pay for fields from a third party, the school district or whoever they're renting fields from. Then they're going to need financial subsidy because they can't afford, they can't push all those fees onto users, and they're going to come back to us for a subsidy. So it seems unwise at this point, premature, for us to put that fee in, which is actually a pretty high fee. $35,000 is a lot of money for those groups. It may be that things turn out that the economics don't change that much and they don't have to pay for field space, and that a fee does work out, but we don't know that now, and I'm uncomfortable putting it in up front. We can leave it in there on hold to be discussed, to be determined. That's fine with me, but I feel very uncomfortable putting that in there, and I would ask that we consider taking it out for now. As far as offsetting that income, you know, that we have in the budget, right now we're projected to have something like a $90,000 surplus. This would make it a $60,000 surplus without that fee. Okay, the second issue that I wanted to have a discussion about before we pass a budget is our fund balance. And as you all saw, in the documents that we have in front of us, the recommended budget, the projected fund balance at the end of 2012 would be about $5,500,000. However, that's actually not accurate. That is based on numbers from 2011 budget, which has turned out not to be true. The forecasted end of our fund balance for 2011 is actually $500,000 more, roughly. And so our starting fund balance in the beginning of 2012 is going to be higher. Hence, our ending fund balance will be higher. We'll actually have a fund balance at the end of 2012 projected as about $6 million. That we need to set aside, pursuant to the policy that we've discussed tonight, about $4.1 million to set aside and not touch as our fund balance. I guess we're calling that assigned at this point. That leaves us with a significant amount of money in excess of what we need to set aside. It's $1.8 million or thereabouts. I feel very strongly that we need to earmark that money and earmark it formally in a resolution with this budget so that we start to fund a capital improvement fund, transfer some of it to the capital improvement fund, and transfer some of it to a sinking fund, a new fund for our post-employment benefits that are not in this budget and are not accounted for. Now, I recognize we don't know exactly what those numbers are right now. We may not know what those numbers are for a while, but we know they're big. They're a lot bigger than what we can set aside. And I think that is a wise thing for us to do. We've heard that recommendation from our CBFAC, from our CARFAC, and I'd like to see that be a part of this budget, that we have a formal resolution setting aside that money towards those funds. And in our discussions in 2013, when we talk about how we're going to spend these things, we can talk about how we're going to spend, but no matter how we decide to spend them, that we have to have the money set aside. So I want that to be a part of our discussion in passing this budget as well. And as far as only spending for the bare minimum for capital improvement next year, I think it's crazy. to set aside all this money for rainy day. Meanwhile, it's raining, our roofs are leaking, and it's ruining all of our assets. I mean, we need to take care of some of these capital improvement costs. I mean, some of the things that we do not have set to spend on are the stormwater management that is under RMS that needs to be finished, our sanitary sewer improvements, the comfort stations which are falling down and which we need, the Willows, Sulpizo, and library buildings which need to be addressed. So I think we need to use some of this money that's in excess of our fund balance policy requirement, put it towards these long-term expenses, and start to take care of these asset needs. That's it for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. Any other board comment?
I have a few comments. I found your comments a bit interesting on the field usage fees, because the rec programs do collect money from the participants, and your logic was also that it's okay for them to pay the school district but not okay to pay us. So I found that a little bit interesting. But I do believe philosophically that users of services should pay more than non-users, and I don't think a $10 fee per participant is unusually large. I do think that Bob and Bill, you guys did a really nice job over time getting us to really good information. Unfortunately, you're in a position of dealing with history, because if you look at the historical tax increases on a compound growth rate, they're about 7.5%, which is far in excess of the inflationary rate in the area. I think you have proposed a variety of options here that can allow us to have a 0% tax increase. Doesn't address some of the fundamental issues about capital, and it doesn't address the fundamental issue about the long-term employment benefits that we have to deal with going forward. But I do think you've done a very nice job here. And if we do go down the route of a rental housing inspection person, in no way should that be an employee. I don't think we ought to be bringing on too many new employees until we figure out where we're going with these post-employment retirement benefits. I'm sympathetic to the rate out, but I do think a 0% is a feasible alternative in the absence of addressing some of those other more fundamental, much more expensive issues.
Just respond to, there is a logic to the field users. The youth sports programs are serving a function that is really a function of local government. If we didn't have a Little League and we didn't have a soccer club, we would have to do it, okay? We couldn't be a town without Little League baseball. I mean, it would really denigrate what we have to offer as a community. So it's our responsibility to make sure that these are vibrant programs. It's not the school district's responsibility. The school district's responsibility is to educate our children and provide gym to their students. It is our responsibility to provide a vibrant youth sports program. We are very blessed that we have these youth organizations and all of the volunteers and all of the parents that put so much time and energy and effort into these organizations that takes it off our shoulders. But ultimately, if they stepped back or found it unfeasible, we'd have to step in. So I do feel that we have a responsibility to make sure it's workable, and it's not the school district's responsibility. That's just the way I see it.
We have a difference of opinion.
Bill? Okay. I'll just make a few brief comments. First, again, thanks to all staff for presenting the information as they have this year. This makes this decision for me a little bit easier than it has been in the past. And to counter the argument that we've raised taxes 11% and 9%, and we can't keep raising taxes. I agree. I don't like to raise taxes. I mean, I don't think any elected official wants to raise taxes. But we have a fiduciary responsibility to the township taxpayers and to residents to make sure that this government functions, and it functions as well as it can. I'll mention that in 2001, 2003, 2007, 2008, and 2009, there were 0% tax increases. And what happens next? We run out of money. That's what happens next. And in those same years that we didn't increase taxes, what do? We borrowed millions of dollars, and we spent millions of dollars to pay for things like cars. I keep saying it, police cars, not to pick on the police, but any type of vehicle, what I call short life assets. In fact, this year we're paying for a police car that was purchased in 1982. That car will be paid off at the end of this year. That car was taken out of service in 1985. We pay, in this year, we will pay about $4.3 million of debt service. $4.3 million of debt service. Can you imagine how much work we could get done if we didn't have to spend $4.3 million of debt service? Yet about $20 million of the debt that we hold in this township was used for operations, day-to-day costs that you should never use that money for. So yeah, we played, I'll take responsibility, because in 1 year or 2 years I voted for 0% tax increase. But in those same years I argued that we should not be using bond money to pay for short life assets. But the point was we were living beyond our means. We were borrowing money. The whole world's doing it, right? The federal government's doing it. The state government's doing it. But we're not allowed to do it here. We're not supposed to do it here. We're supposed to spend the money we have. We're not supposed to live beyond our means. We're supposed to pay for things like that with cash. So I support the tax increase. I'm glad it's a 3% tax increase and not a 9% and not a 10% or a 20%. I think next year we're going to have some really tough pills to swallow. I think we're going to see the true cost of government coming to the table. And then we have to make tough decisions. Do we want to continue to do things the way we do? So I support the 3% tax increase, the increase in the cost for the sewer rent. What I'm seeing is that all of our costs go up. We do everything we can. Our finance director does everything he can to reduce the cost, to find better rates for services, find better rates for our insurance. We do a lot of things to cut spending. In the last 3 years, I sat through layoffs. I sat there and watched people lose their jobs because we didn't have the money to keep them employed. And so I'm able to sit in the middle. I get to hear both sides. I get to visualize and see a lot of things. And I say, it's better to raise taxes a little bit each year to cover the true increases in costs than to say we're not going to do it for 3 years and then all of a sudden we have to hit everyone with a big increase. That makes no sense to me. It's easier for me, for instance, my taxes will go up $16 based on this increase, $16. But I know every Tuesday that my trash will get picked up, and I know if the police are called, they will show up. And I know if there's someone trying to break into my car, the police will apprehend that person and arrest them. So I know the services will get done. I know that the Parks and Recreation is there. When my kids were young, they were able to go into the programs and do the summer camps. I know that most of the kids in the township benefit from everything that we do. So I support the tax increase. I certainly support the hiring of the inspector. This is a long time coming on terms of rental housing. We have a lot of issues in the 7th Ward as well as in the 5th Ward with rental housing. If you look at a map of the township, most of the rental housing is in about 3 or 4 of the areas, not the entire township, and we feel the brunt of it. So we really do need to have those properties inspected. As far as the fees on the sports, I pushed for this last year. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. Nobody wants to say we need $10 from each kid to play sports. But we have to pay for the services. The fields have to be cut. We have to buy lawnmowers. We have to buy infield graders. We have to buy seed. We have to pay our employees to maintain these fields. A lot of times, the fields, when the participants leave the fields, they're not as nice as when they came. So we have to pay someone to take care of that. And that includes picking up the trash cans. It's not free. There's no free lunch here. So for me, if everyone pays some piece of this, everyone has some skin in the game, it's the fair outcome for me. Not for everyone, but for me. So I support the budget as it is. I think it's a decent budget. Again, I commend all staff for working really hard to do more and more with less and less. That's my comment. Thank you. Okay, public comment. Thanks for listening.
Martin Heldring, 305 Audubon Avenue. I read through all 168 pages of version 2 of this budget over the weekend. I have a number of, I'm surprised how detailed this conversation got so quickly. I have a number of those kind of questions, but Bill, if it's okay, I'll refer those to you later. I want to commend Commissioner Kirtley and Commissioner Higgins on their comments. I think they're spot on. I have no idea why Commissioner Schaefer would pick on the sports fees. It's such a nominal amount in what clearly is, you've got much more bigger issues to deal with. I also wanted to commend the township. I remember last year's budget, and this is a huge improvement over that. But that being said, I still have some comments. The budget, when you look at it, only contains a reference to 2011 budget, right? There's no actual numbers for 2011. It's highly unusual. I understand 2011 isn't over yet, but the norm is you'd have numbers through the third quarter, or you'd have year-to-date annualized, or you'd have last trailing 12 months, so that people, when they're looking at a budget, can look at the 5 previous years, what's going on this year, and then look at what's proposed. To not have that, in my view, means you take this budget and send it back to get that. You cannot make a decision on a budget without that information. There are projections on capital improvements. There are no projections for anything else. So you've all noted that there's a lot of deferred expenditures. But can anybody tell me, in order to pay for those deferred expenditures next year, what the tax increase is going to have to be? I can't. But everybody in this room, and you all who pay taxes, should want to know. You'd get that information if you had 5-year projections sitting there. 1-year projections, I'll take one. Because then you can see what happens in 2013 when all those unfunded pension liabilities, all those capital improvements that aren't being paid for this year, come home to roost. There's no, the summary is terrific. It's great in the beginning. But I got frustrated as I got back through, page 100, and I saw a change, and that's going to be some of my questions. Where was that employee? Where's the numbers? There's no explanation on a line item basis of what's going on. You just can't tell. That's unusual. I think confusing from a taxpayer perspective. Cash accounting. There's a reference to cash accounting in here. The audit's on an accrual basis. It's a technical issue, but normally what you do is you have an accrual set of financial statements and a cash flow statement, and the accrual financial statements bridge to the audit. So anybody looking at the statements and the numbers can follow them through. If you have cash on one side and accrual on the other, you cannot reconcile it. At least there's no reconciliation statement that I saw in there. I couldn't help, I looked all the way through, I never saw a mention of CARFAC. I thought CARFAC in part was here to help you with this. That's what I thought. I know they have other responsibilities like the audit, but my gosh, that's what they're there for. And 130 pages, I didn't see them mentioned. So have they looked at this? Do they opine on it? Do they think 3%, 5%? I mean, 3%, frankly, is just your CPI. There's no other validation for 3% being the right tax increase. All the expenditures that are being deferred, people need to really understand that when you get back into the detail of it, there's a lot in public works. We heard that from Mr. Orsini early on. The deferred pension liability, I think, is $10 million, if I got it right. Is that right, Bill?
You're addressing the board or not?
Okay. I think it's 9. He's nodding his head. 9 to 10. Let's figure out. I mean, it's nice to put $2 million aside for that. That's 20% of it. You're just nibbling at the edges of this. The Willows continues to operate a deficit. You haven't addressed that in a year since the CBFAC report came out. I also note, I'm glad, the tone seems to have changed given this budget, but I did note in here that the open lands fund is insufficient to pay current debt. So I just add that as another metric that any talk of purchasing additional open lands, I would assume, just has to be off the table despite your campaign. I also noted, Commissioner Nagel, that in a previous meeting you mentioned $1 million surplus. I looked all through this. I couldn't find it. And certainly when you referenced that, I expected that the financial condition of Radnor had improved. I didn't expect a 3% tax increase. So not at this moment, but maybe over patch or something, maybe you can enlighten us as to what happened to that $1 million, because it's not in this budget. So what does it mean? You guys there's been excessive spending, you pointed out over the years. You've run up a pile of debt for things like this. I can't tell you how this is when this is going to end, but I can certainly tell you how it's going to end. It's just like what's going on in Europe. The Italians now have a stock market in real terms that it's a level of Mussolini in 1940. Was there a single guy over there that thought that that was going to happen? No. What's going to happen here is at some point the taxpayers are going to say, no mas, we're not going to take another tax increase, and all these expenditures are going to come home to roost. And you're going to go to the debt markets, and the debt markets either suddenly or over time are going to say no. No. It's happening everywhere you look. Radnor is no different. And if you don't address it and stop nibbling at the edges of this, it's going to happen sooner. It's inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before the next person
Yes.
just comes up, just while that's still fresh in everyone's mind. I don't disagree with Mr. Heldring that the year-to-date numbers would be beneficial in this document. The problem is space and timing. The year-to-date numbers are given out on a monthly basis. Granted, it's in another document. Ideally, we'll get them incorporated into here. But I do want to point out one major difference that we have to live by law is that the budget isn't just an estimate of where we think we're going to end. It's a legal restriction on the parameters we have to operate within. So that's why the 2011 budget numbers are in here. In their full year budget numbers, that's what the board has adopted. That's the authorization that the township has to work within. So that's why those are useful numbers. The other aspect, I'll deal with the CARFAC in the forecasting in the same sense. I didn't include CARFAC in here because, honestly, we're playing a lot of catch-up, or they're playing a lot of catch-up with the late start this year. They're still getting their arms wrapped around a lot of these major issues, still going through the CBFAC report. I can't even, and they've been meeting since mid-July, probably about 10 to 15 times now they've met. So they are up and going. I didn't feel comfortable putting words in their mouth here. Did not have the opportunity to have them add any information to this. We will be meeting to review the budget. And the anticipation is not only with the audit process, but also future budget processes that they are in on the front end of it. The problem with this year is they didn't get going until late, and that's why they're not in here yet. On the forecasting end, they already have worked on developing a forecasting model for us. I actually have the file, and it is something that we are refining now and hope to have up and running when we start meeting next year to make the decisions on these long-term liabilities. It seems to be implied or mentioned that we're deferring them, but it's not. We're not deferring them indefinitely. There's a calendar that the board has adopted when these things are going to be discussed. So they were not addressed in this document, knowing that there is a plan to at least start the discussion on how they will be addressed moving forward. So the forecast will be there, so we can understand as decisions are made what that looks like over multiple years. And then in terms of the level of detail, I'm not sure at what level of detail it's necessary to demonstrate how much things are moving from line item to line item. If there's more detail that the board would like to see, let me know, and we'll do the best we can.
I would just like to also point out that for anybody who's listening, we did receive, and you can get on the website, actuals and forecasted year-end actuals. So we have that information. I, for one, I'm sure all my colleagues use that in analyzing next year's predictions. And that you can get that on the website under the Finance Department. Bill posts every document that he puts out. And that is where you will see the forecasted year-end position for 2011 is a $1 million surplus, as opposed to what we had budgeted, which was about $495,000 or $500,000. It's now, we are now forecasting the actual to be $1 million surplus.
Public comment?
Just have one little thing. I'm here to support the library. I see it's on the agenda, and I don't really know what did y'all decide about the library and the funding?
The funding level was restored.
It was restored?
Yes.
Oh, good, thank you, sorry.
Be careful in terminology, that's the proposal.
It's the
Well, that's
proposed
the-
in this budget.
On the budget and the motion on the table, it is restored.
Good.
And you have to give your name and address.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Jean Converse, 125 Bloomingdale Avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't believe anybody, any of my colleagues or anyone on staff is recommending or advocating at this point to rescind that.
Here's 2 cents from your treasurer. I believe the CB fact, and Mr. Heldrig brought up the idea that we ought to have a fund here for making donations to the township. Instead of getting all tied up in a $10 fee, why don't we just make it a suggested donation and put it out there so that those who can afford more can help out that family that the wage owner lost a job, he's got 3 kids, they got 3 tennis rackets, but they don't have the money. It could be something that would bring in more than the
John, you may
35.
not be aware, but there's a 501c3 that's being set up, it's getting going, that provides opportunities for people to donate money to that fund, which they would then give the township to support programming.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. I thought the last time that Mr. Heldrig brought it up, it wasn't responded to.
No,
And I
Mr.
think
Heldring was talking about open space, from what I remember. However, I think I did talk about this in the past.
But I think that would...
and several of our surrounding townships have similar organizations. The nice part about this, John, of course, being a 501, the folks have an opportunity to get a tax.
Right. Now, I would phrase it in some way that maybe some people would give more than $10.
Yep.
And you might wind up with more money than you would with the fee and the stigma of putting it to them. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Public comment?
Hi, my name is Susan Bowers, and I'm a Wayne resident, and I too want to support the board's vote to restore the library's funding to 2010 levels, and if you have surplus, you might even consider giving the library a little bit more money, because in my opinion, this is one of the services that the township provides that is probably used by the widest variety of people that you have in this community, and some of the services that the library offers, many residents would not be able to find anywhere else that this kind of help, and we should value our library, I think, more than we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Samuel Etris from 115 Runnymede Avenue. I have a small business, I'm a consulting firm of which I am the only member, and I use the library considerably because they are capable of getting articles both of technical nature, both from U.S. journals and also foreign journals. So I find it very helpful as a small business to use the library, and I think that you should consider that not only as a group that helps educate our youth, but is also very beneficial to small business. Thank you.
My name is Patty Barker, and I live at 920 Lewis Lane in Rosemont. I'm also the chair of the Garrett Hill Coalition. First off, I want to encourage the commissioners to hire the rental housing inspector. That's something that's viewed very strongly in Garrett Hill since we have so many student houses. But I'm here specifically tonight to ask you to talk to you about the 5-year capital improvement plan, specifically with regard to park and recreation facilities, general parks and recreation, which is listed as Group 7-3. I see that the bathrooms for Emlyn Tennell Field and Clem McCrone Park have been pushed back to 2015. Emlyn Tennell bathrooms have been in and out of the budget since 2005. In 2008, our Commissioner John Fisher voluntarily pushed them out to 2012 from 2010 because of the township's budget woes. If they stay where they are in the budget, Garrett Hillians and all the sports teams that use Emlyn Tennell will have waited 10 years for a comfort station. Right now, there is nothing there. Clem McCrone Park serves as the face of Radnor Township every year for the annual 4th of July parade. I took some pictures of Clem McCrone Comfort Station yesterday, and I'll give them to you to look at while I speak. I was unable to get interior pictures, but I can tell you that the bathrooms are in deplorable condition. In 2009, 4 members of the Garrett Hill community repainted the interior of the restrooms, installed paper towel dispensers and shower curtain dividers to separate the toilets. These neighbors felt it was imperative to improve the appearance of this facility due to the profound state of disrepair. It was an embarrassment on the eve of the parade. This work was all accomplished the week before the parade. All supplies and labor were donated by these community members. In the 5-year capital plan, I see that comfort station rehabs for various parks are allocated $250,000 in 2012. In 2013, the West Wayne Preserve wetlands restoration is allocated $350,000. Also in 2013, Fenimore Woods is slated to receive roof improvements to their pavilion, $15,000, as well as an upgrade of that pavilion, $135,000. Odoricio Park is also given $75,000 for a comfort station upgrade in 2013. Replacing playground equipment for various parks and replacing picnic structures for various parks are each allocated $5,000 in 2013. That adds up to $765,000 for various park improvements over the next 2 years, all before the Garrett Hill parks receive any money. In fact, Garrett Hill will have to wait 2 more years beyond 2013 before the community sees any Radnor Township money. The public would like to know who and how these disbursements are decided because it doesn't seem fair, and it doesn't seem to be in the interests of the overall township. It seems like the rationale for making these decisions is politically motivated. Radnor Township made a commitment to the Garrett Hill process back in 2008 and 2009 when it adopted the Garrett Hill Master Plan and the Garrett Hill Zoning District ordinances. After investing in the Garrett Hill process and learning that the park's preservation and maintenance were the highest priority for this community, how could one not be cynical when our local government turns its back on its commitment by ignoring the outcome of this process? So now the Garrett Hill parks are last. Now that we have the master plan and now that we know the communities well, I would think that this community priority would be reflected in the 2012 capital improvement plan, not 3 years hence. We've waited long enough. I respectfully request.
You understand that $250,000 isn't funded? It's not in the capital plan.
Well, it's listed in this.
But it's one of the unfunded items.
All right, well, you can finish listening to me and then. I respectfully request that the board allocate $175,000 in 2012 for the bathrooms at Emlyn Tennell, $100,000 for them, and Clem McCrone, $75,000. Our community is advocating that these comfort stations be added or replaced before any other park facilities are added or replaced. It's time to take proper care of the facilities we already have before we again tax, spend, and neglect. And it's time for Garrett Hill to be at the top of the list instead of at the bottom. Garrett Hillians have been very patient. It's our turn. That's what's fair. Thank you for listening, and I thank you for your service to the citizens of Radnor Township.
Thank you. John Rice, just a point of clarification for me. If the board introduces this ordinance tonight, do we have the latitude to change the capital, the 5-year capital budget at our next meeting? Or does it have to be, any changes have to be entered now?
No, you have under the charter, once you introduce it, it's approved, it then gets advertised. You're aiming for, I believe, the 12th, which means there's an advertisement that has to be in the paper by December 5th for adoption on the 12th. The final budget under the charter, 7.07C, says if the final budget exceeds, total expenditures are increased more than 10%, then you've got to go through that process again. Otherwise, you've got to adopt what gets advertised. If you increase, that's the only limitation, John, in the charter under 7.07.
And in terms of for instance, the 5-year capital plan is beyond 2012, so we're not really, the capital plan is not really approving the expenses, because those expenses would have to be approved in each subsequent budget.
Correct.
So in essence, we can move things in the 2013, 14, 15, and so on around without really...
This just deals with the 2012, this
Right.
provision deals with 2012 budget and your procedure under the charter.
Okay. And Mr. Zinkowski, the $250,000 that is in the 2012 capital plan, that is not funded then at this point?
The $250,000 would be out of the capital fund, so the board can determine how that goes. But maybe we've done a poor job of explaining of the plan of 2012 going through 12, where a lot of these conversations and discussions will be had in January. We talk about capital equipment replacement, township facilities in May of next year, where a lot of those determinations will be made. So really, to comply with the 5-year plan is basically, that's all it is a plan, but there are so many items in which the board will need to decide how we are going to fund these, and then how are we going to do these. So I apologize for not making that clear enough as we've gone through when we've talked about this plan, and these like we're nipping at the edges or we're not addressing those. This plan for 12 is looking at all of these, where the board will decide all the issues that we have and how are we going to fund those. And funding those are either going to be with, being creative with public-private partnerships, which we saw how that conversation took us for 9 months to make a determination on one field. Those types of items, or do we add revenues, or do we reduce, programs and services? It's pretty clear of how we're going to go, but that's where you need to have a plan. And the idea, and I think going back to saying, well, let's just do this project right now and not follow any type of plan or process of how we're going to fund those. So that's where the intent is to have this schedule and to be able to say, here's all the items we have. How are we going to address these, from restroom buildings, which I don't think there's any argument. Those have to be addressed. How do you fund all these? And I'm sure as we start to fund one, we will see various segments of the community come out and say, how about us, how about us? But again, to prioritize those of how we're going to address these. And again, I think the opportunities exist for public-private partnerships to reach out to different organizations to help fund these, which I think now, given the economy and the challenges that are here, this is where I think government has to do things differently and look at these opportunities that are out there, from sponsorships to getting various other funding sources than always going back to the resident to increase taxes to be able to do these. So I think there's an opportunity here, and that's where I think we want to be able to have this plan at. But as the board determines here where those capital dollars need to be funded, and that's something where, John, those funds are available, so the board could at some particular time say, we want to be able to address these. We know we have a restroom building that we have to bid out, which I think, Steve, you're working on those final details. I'm going to use those 2 restrooms as an example to have those as option bids. I think it goes back to some of the things that were spoken about, the opportunity for someone else to help fund some of those, where maybe you have an organization that wants to be able to fund those. So there's a lot of opportunities for those that exist.
Can I just clarify something, John Rice, you just said in answer to that question? If we pass if we introduce the budget as it's presented tonight
Right. By ordinance.
by ordinance,
Right.
can we tweak it before
On the 12th, you can. Yes.
up to 10%?
Right.
So as long as we're not changing it more than 10%, we can still
Right.
make small changes.
10% over total expenditures is what it says.
Is that increase or decrease?
Just increase.
Increase, only 10%. You can reduce spending as much
Correct.
as you want. You just can't increase it more than 10%.
So up until the night we actually pass it, the final version of it, we can still make small changes.
Right, within the parameters of what that says. The other thing that you can do is 708 permits you to revise the budget in the year after a municipal election. So that's in a situation where a whole board would change and a new board comes in and wants to do something totally different, which I don't think really applies, but that's, budget revisions are possible. Right, but that, right. Anytime there's a municipal election, you can then do that, and that's in all the codes and it's in your charter.
Thank you. Okay, public comment?
Hi, my name is Linda Gonzalez. I'm from 251 Callahan Avenue in Rosemont. I'm here to speak on the hiring of the additional rental housing inspector. Radnor has an ordinance on record and has the zoning on record, and now it's time to enforce them. It's time for the township to step up and enforce no more than 2 students. Whether or not it was the township's intent, the township has given Garrett Hill the impression that Radnor does not care about us. It's a general belief that if the student housing problem had been in Wayne, it would have been eliminated by now. More importantly, Radnor Township's lack of student housing enforcement demoralizes our children. I say this as a mother of 3 who has raised her children in Garrett Hill. Whether or not Radnor means to give our children this impression, Radnor Township gives our children the impression that they are not important enough, that they are not valued enough to have their neighborhood protected from these excessive students. My question to you, as Radnor Township representatives, is this the message that you want to give our children and to the people of Garrett Hill? Because I want our children and our families to know that they are just as valuable and as important as the people in every other area of Radnor. I'm not asking for something new. I'm asking Radnor enforce its ordinance and zoning for student housing to return Garrett Hill to its quality of life. Unless you've lived among Villanova students, you cannot understand the destruction that these excessive students bring. Villanova University has yet to take any steps to control the students that they let loose in our neighborhoods. Radnor Township has the responsibility to its residents to enforce our laws. Devalued homes affect everyone in Radnor. We need an additional rental housing inspector. On my street alone, we have 3 houses in a row, same owner, and a boarding house. I'm not sure when the boarding house was last inspected, but every year I have problems with this 3 houses with the same landlord. Every year she has more than 2 students in each house. Last year, Matt Bauman, with a direction from John Rice, had told the landlord that she could not have more than 2 people in each house this year. And she does. I notified the township by email on 8/16, based upon my observations, that there were more in 241, and again on 8/24, that all 3 houses have more than 2. On 241, the first house, there are at least 3 or 4 students residing in that house. 3 of the vehicles are parked there on a regular basis. The 4th vehicle, which has been there since the beginning, hides its car up the street. It's gone to moving the car to Summit Terrace and parking on their street. And their street already has parking issues. I noticed when we were out Halloween night, while I was taking my grandson trick-or-treating, she parked her car on Summit. And I watched as she took her bag and her books, and she walked through a neighbor's yard onto Callahan and went into 241. At 245, I have a picture of the house. was given a student rental house license. That house is not built for 2 students. In addition, there's also a wooden deck, an old wooden deck, and no one knows when it was last inspected. There's someone occupying that 3rd floor that has the old wooden deck. The lights are on just about every night. There's no fire escape from that 3rd floor. And we have yet to be able to get an answer as to whether or not that is a safety issue. A number of years ago, there had been a fire at that house. At 249, there are 3 cars there on a regular basis. My husband's been double parked in. Another evening, we had one of the students back into my husband's car and drive off. And we've had them drive onto our property, onto our driveway. And it wasn't until the last incident and my persistence in contacting the township and the police that I was told that someone will be taking a look at it. It has now been 3 months. And this is just my street. This is just one landlord. This happens year after year. We get put off over and over again, and nothing gets done. And how many rental students are there in Radnor, and how many are actually being acted upon? Radnor Township needs to be a true student housing inspector. Back when Jimmy Marks was here, which I'm probably dating myself, but the township used to obtain search warrants. And not like the process today where the township contacts the landlord and schedules a visit, giving the students the opportunity to move things out to make it look like there are only 2 residing there. It's time for Radnor to step up and enforce the ordinance and the zoning, and to give Garrett Hill the message that their families are important. Radnor needs to step up and return the quality of life to Garrett Hill. Please hire the additional housing inspector. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I also have
public comment.
Roberta Winters. I live in 326 Williams Road in Rosemont, and I would like to reinforce the need for a full-time additional staff of the Rental Housing Code Enforcement Officer. It's not only in the best interest of those who live in the Garrett Hill and throughout Radnor Township, but it's also in the best interest of those who rent our facilities in our township. I think we overlook their needs for health and safety, and it's also a need for those who live in the community because it does make a difference in the value of our own properties. I do go around the communities. I do distribute flyers as part of the block captain process. I see the homes in which students are living, and I'm concerned for their safety and well-being, and I'm also concerned for the value of the properties that are adjacent to the rental houses. So I think having a full-year rental housing code enforcement officer at $94,000 is really money well spent for our community. And I would also second the comments that have been made by others tonight regarding moving up the needs for bathroom facilities, or comfort stations as you call them, at both Emlyn-Tennell Field and at Clem McCrone Park. I've had 2 daughters who've used those parks extensively. I've had to run across streets to neighbors to use facilities when they're not available and not fit to be used. I've seen people using trees and other, bushes because there are a lack of facilities. And it's really just not the nicest thing you want to have happen in the local parks. So I think moving it up would make a difference to our community and make our parks more attractive to our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Public comment?
Good evening. My name is Philip R. I live in Meredith Avenue in Garrett Hill. And I know I'm going to be very brief because I know the hour is late. But I do want to talk that you've had some big numbers thrown around tonight. It's a very big budget. You have some very big decisions to make. But I do want to support the two little pieces that may be little as part of this budget, but are big because they're important to people of the 7th Ward, and we believe also to the people of all Radnor Township who use the facilities, whether it be the parks or the streets, and use our neighborhoods. So I'd like to support, first of all, that Garrett Hill be moved, Garrett Hill Parks be moved from the back of the line up on the capital budget, whether it be something that you're actually going to fund tonight or later, or whenever it is funded, that it takes a place as a priority in your parks improvement plan for the reasons you've heard tonight so far. And secondly, also support the hiring of a rental housing inspector. I want to commend you all for having passed a very comprehensive and important rental housing ordinance this past year. It was responsible and it's fair. To not enforce that ordinance is not fair. And we can see that even in the face of these ordinances on the books, that there are many instances where they're not being enforced and they're being flaunted. That's not fair. It's not fair to the people in the 7th Ward and other wards where these have these problems, but also throughout the whole township. I understand that the rental housing fees pay either most, if not all, of the salary for or expenses of a rental housing inspector. So the last point is really that if users of services should be charged more for services rendered than those who are non-users of services, then perhaps also rental housing fees should be used to enforce the rental housing ordinances for the health, safety, and enforcement of the ordinances itself. Thanks very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Tammy, I had a question for you. When I was on the Park and Rec Board, the Park and Rec Board used to look at the capital plan and prioritize it and rank things. Do they still go through that process?
The plan for next year was to do that. And I just want to make the comment that that listing was actually not prioritized or put in any specific order by Steve Norsini or myself. I think it was just a byproduct of how certain projects fell over the years. So it was never intended for any of those projects to be in a certain order. And in fact, we had every intent to step through that process with the Parks Board after January.
Because I'd like their feedback on what they think are the priority comfort stations.
Sure, and the plan was to do so for all of the capital projects relative to the parks and facilities.
Any further public comment? Okay, I'll call the question. Some of these items that were just commented on the capital plan, it seems like we will be able to make those changes. However, since there is no funding for 2012 at this moment for capital improvements.
That's not accurate. There's no funding for.
Well, for park improvements.
That's right. What's
Thank
listed
you.
as parks, willows, and recreation facilities is not funded.
Right. It's not currently funded in this budget. There's a possibility the board will have to make a decision by the last meeting when we adopt the budget. I will certainly advocate for that, but I'm not going to do it now because I think we have time. But I appreciate the comments. So at this point, any further board comment?
I would just like to mention that the $10 field fee, I think, is appropriate. We have tough times. Everybody has to chip in, so I think that that all the sports teams, everyone that used the field should buy into the maintenance of those fields. It's a very expensive item. I know I run the softball league. We pay $275 per team for the use of the fields. As far as the budget's concerned, when you have a 3% budget, I think you should do a 0% increase. I think we can go along with Don Curley and his suggestions, and I've been in government for 30 years, and have voted for a lot of tax increases where needed. I think this year we can hold the line and continue to work with our staff, review all those things, and this year we're fortunate that our revenues increased by a significant number, and we continue to reduce expenses, although there were additional expenses that were beyond our control. So I think it would be prudent to vote for a zero tax increase this year, continue to work together, go through the process, and then decide next year. In '09, we were hit with the same thing. Do we do a 3% tax increase or not? And we had a $6 million beginning balance, fund balance, just like we have this time. So we're not strapped for the funds. And at that time, it was a 4-3 vote not to increase taxes. We didn't get a lot of things done. We didn't save $550,000 for front yard collection trash till John came on in the end of '09. There were a lot of decisions that weren't made in '09 that could have maybe kept that tax increase for 10 down a little bit. But we finally made some of those decisions, and we're continuing to work and make decisions. And the biggest thing is that we can't do all the things we want to do. If they weren't reinstating the funds for the library and the senior center in Surrey, I'd vote for a tax increase. But I think that we can hold off on the economic development person. Hiring the police officer will be 6 months before we hire a police officer. And I think we can do a zero tax increase and continue to work, because we are going to have monthly meetings about this budget and continue to make tough decisions. But we cannot continue to raise taxes just because we feel that 3% this year, 3% next 3% is better than 9% 3 years from now. I'd rather vote for a tax increase for 9% 3 years from now than 3 every year, because I'll continue to work over the next couple of years so we don't have a 9% tax increase. So that's my position on the issue.
I'll call the question. This is to introduce ordinance 2011-26 with a 3.7511 mil tax rate and a sewer charge of $5.74 per 1,000 gallons. All those in favor say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. And it's tied.
I'd like to move to keep the millage rate the same and with the increase in the sewer fund.
Second.
Board comment? Public comment? I think we've already discussed it. All those in favor say aye.
Yes, public
Raise your
comment.
hands. Oh.
Sorry, a little slow getting up. Philip Wilson, Wayne. Bill, I really appreciate your comments, and I agree. I mean, if there's, what we're looking at is a huge unknown coming down the pike in terms of liabilities. That's been clear sitting back in the back of the room all night. So other than meeting the CPI increase and putting in 3% for a new budget, I don't see where that money is actually going to, unless you have a resolution that it's going to be put in a sinking fund or whatever, escrow for monies for the liabilities that we're going to address or identify in 2012. So as one citizen, I'd love to see a no % increase, and then let's find out what we really have coming down the pike. Who knows what it is? I haven't heard a number yet that really stands out to be solid, that anybody understands. So it could dwarf what budget we have or what debt we have. I don't know. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay.
Roberta Winters. I've been not sat on many commissioners' meetings, but I have sat on many school board meetings when they discuss the budget. And I do know that there are benefits of having a small incremental raise over a long period of time as opposed to having a significant increase in 1 year. I don't have the economics to understand it, but I've heard very good arguments in that behalf. And I know I can't go to the grocery store and buy what I bought a year ago for what I have to spend now. So it seems to me that a 3%, which is the cost of living allowance, which every state representative just received, and every legislator in Harrisburg just received as an automatic cost of living allowance, seems to me to be a reasonable amount of money. But then again, I'm not an economist, but I've heard arguments very strongly for this small incremental increase rather than whammy taxpayers with a big sum of money that they aren't prepared to pay 3 years down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, because I see the 3-3 probably staying for a while here.
Right, Bob, we can stay up late. It's
oh,
okay.
I know. But, I understand the concerns, I think, both sides of the issue. And again, it's good to hear a lot of the recognition that there is huge decisions to be made in the future. There's no question there are liabilities that sit out there, very large for the township to decide how we're going to fund those in the future. Looking at and listening to some of the conversation, if we look at deferring the economic development manager's position until the third quarter, and bringing the rental housing inspector on second quarter of the year, just given the reality of the approval of the budget, the advertising, and getting the person on board, you're not going to see that person probably to the second quarter anyhow. The potential is to bring that down to 2% increase, where I think if we go through that, Bill, I don't know if you have that from the recommendation to show the difference between the 3% and the 2%. Again, to go to zero, I think we're shorthanded right now with the way of police officers and not being able to go back and being able to fund those. Is a concern, and especially at the time with the staffing levels that we have, officers on the street to protect the entire community. I think those levels are scary at the time that we have, so there is the need to replace those positions. If Jim, if you're going to be able to bring up from Bill's laptop there, which has the summary from the website, they'll be able to do the comparison there of the difference between the 3% and the 2%. And again, I understand too that there's a lot of decisions that need to be made in regards to funding the long-term issues as well as staffing issues. There's a lot of discussion that has to take place. But again, I think the inspection side of the world is critical to be able to fund that. Given the number of complaints that we have, that at times are being sent to the police department, which are tying their hands and the amount of time they're putting in, as well as a lot of different areas to where it would be nice to have one inspector that's able to respond, to schedule that person so that they're there at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, have that person there on Saturday or Sunday. Because again, it's very easy to know that if you're between 8 and 4 and 8 and 5, how you be able to sidestep around those. To be able to have that type of enforcement and have that type of person to be able to specifically follow up on those particular issues are going to be a huge benefit, because that ties to not only just on some of the issues that are brought up, but there's property maintenance issues as well, trash and storage of different items. So there's a lot of those items that are out there as well.
Bob, can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
A minute. Look, I don't think you should hire the inspector, but you can do potentially through a contract service. But under your logic, if you send them out there at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, are they a salaried employee or are they an hourly employee?
I think we can work on scheduling that person, so there you have flex time that's built in there. We're trying to work on that now, is come up with a policy to be able to present to the board on flex time. But again, if you bring that person in and know that there's shift work, that's part of it,
So
that
they'd
you
be
could
paid
work
straight
that.
time during that period?
That would be correct. So what we could do is look at, if we bring on that schedule, that would drop that to 2%, and then Bill, I'll let you, if you just show the comparison between what that would be, the impact on the, which I know you've done a comparison to show that impact. Okay.
Can I just make a comment about that? I mean, I'm all for going down and, addressing that cost for next year and having a 2% increase. But moving forward, the next year, we're going to have incurred a full year expense for each year moving forward without the matching revenue. So next year we can lower it by having a half year or a quarter year only of expense on these items, and then we don't have to account for the revenue. But the following year there'll be full year employees, and we're going to be left short on covering it.
Well, the budget is a breathing document.
Right, and I'm just all I'm
your
pointing
revenues
out.
increased, as you announced many times this year during the year about the
Yeah.
increase in revenues. Your revenues increase, and we're going to continue to work more efficiently and cut other expenses.
And so all I wanna do
You
is-
can't look at it in a vacuum.
I'm
You have to look
not,
at
but
the
we need
overall.
to be realistic about this, and if we do that, which I would support it, I think it's a good idea, but we'll be short to cover, we will not have raised recurring revenue to match the recurring expense that we're deciding upon, and that we'll face that next year. Now, maybe there'll be some other revenue source.
And maybe there'll be some reduction in expenses.
But also, just to add to Commissioner Schaefer, you do have a fee that is in place that covers
For
that
the
expense
rental
for the
inspection.
inspection, correct?
Yeah, I don't even like that this rental inspection person is part of the budget discussion, because the fees have been in place. We've raised the fees from $25 to $60, and we realized about $100,000 extra revenue, or $75,000 of extra revenue as a result, yet we didn't hire an inspector. So the fact that we're even discussing that hiring in this context doesn't make sense to me. We have an ordinance, we're bound by an ordinance to inspect our rental properties.
John, we're
within
all going to
3
hire an
years.
inspector. The whole board's in support of that.
But
So
we're
we don't
using,
discuss
but
it.
now we're pressuring the manager to cut his tax increase and then try to live within that restriction. And I don't know how it's going to happen. I just, I feel, to me, it's trivial. 3% on the low millage rate. I looked, by the way, I went to the county and I looked at all the millage rates for all the municipalities within Delaware County. We are below the middle, below the mean. And most of those communities don't even compare. And this is including the school tax, all 3 taxes. Our millage rate is less than most, and yet we deliver the highest level of services of all. So to me, our staff have struggled year over year over year to try to eke out a little more productivity and work a little bit harder. And what I see is a lot of people that are getting pretty tired. And we've seen a lot of attrition in the last 3 years. Many employees have left. Some, were laid off, but some left because they were fed up. They couldn't take it anymore. They said, I can't. One of our, I won't name names, I won't even name departments, but one of the directors said to me, the reason I'm quitting is because you voted for a 0% tax increase, and I couldn't do my job without that money. So I felt like personally responsible for that bad decision. I called it, in my opinion, a bad decision. No politician wants to do a tax increase. Obviously, the board is split right now, but I would suggest the more prudent, responsible thing to do is, if we're going to increase funding to the library, restore it to the 2010 level, if we're going to try to replace a police officer that is retiring, we have to do the right thing. We have to raise taxes to cover the expense. I'd love to be able to say, wow, we've been magical. I say this all the time. We're not magical here. Everyone said, how does Radnor do so much with so little? And I said, we don't. We ran up debt to $60 million.
I heard it, John.
Bill, you were part of it.
John.
I was part of it.
John.
We're not going to do it anymore.
John, we did a $10 million bond issue for open space. I haven't paid one tax dollar to fund that bond issue. I came up with a funding source, the real estate transfer tax. So $10 million in bonds are paid by the real estate transfer tax. Plus, we picked up all the other bonds, because that was only $400,000 fee, and we're paying $713. I did 10 sewer projects in my ward.
In the last 2 years,
it cost $18 million.
In the last 2 years, the capital fund.
John, I'm speaking now. It cost $18,000 a household to put in those sewers for those couple hundred homes, and they're all paying that. That bond money, all that money we borrowed to do that, they're paying 1/15 or 1/10 every year plus 6% interest. So the taxpayers aren't paying every dollar of bond issues, John. Everything you say can be refuted. It's your position, and I can have my position. We could debate it all night. But let's find out what we're going to do.
See that what you said is not true.
Oh, okay. Well, all right, John. Fine.
Real estate transfer tax did not, in fact, bridge the gap. Did not, in fact, pay all of that open space activity.
The money in the open space fund came from the real estate transfer tax, and there's enough money in the open space fund to fund that. We're drawing down on the $1 million balance, but we haven't used any tax dollars to fund that $10 million bond issue, John. Not one tax dollar.
Our debt service is $4.4 million this year. $4.4 million. How much did we receive in real estate transfer tax this year?
We started with a balance of $1 million, John. We took
Not
an
received.
We took an $896,000 in 2009, and it's going down now. It's starting to come back up. It's going to be $533 this year, and hopefully it'll continue to come back up, John.
Public comment.
This is probably going to be silly, but I heard that we had some problems with the township manager, that maybe absconded with funds, and we're going through this big court process, how's that
No,
going to be
that's-
paid
no,
for?
no.
Is that done?
No.
No, it's not you. You're new. But I mean, is that taken care of? We don't have to worry
Yes.
about that anymore?
No, we have, that issue is not fully resolved. We did receive a $500,000 settlement from the insurance company on the heels of receiving a $50,000 finding by the State Ethics Commission. And we also had the manager pay back part of his loan. So at this point, some of the money has been recovered, but over I think it was 1.5 million was taken out of the sewer fund over a period of time.
So do
That's-
we still have to pay
That's
that money?
that's not true either. You know, the thing is that he
It
gave
is true.
He gave $800,000 in bonuses, and we've got $600,000, and we're in a legal discussion. Okay, you know, so
But it could be that we
No,
have to
no.
pay this money, right?
no, we've
Okay,
already paid it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
All right.
Yeah, I'm going to call the question just to kill this current motion.
Oh.
Okay.
Because we obviously haven't
Yeah.
resolved it.
Okay.
So those in favor of this second motion for a 0% tax increase, say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
3. Those opposed? Opposed. Okay,
All right. I'll move the 2% tax increase with the increase in the sewer fund.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
Commissioner, in working through this to try to accommodate that, the 0% increase, we're going to have to defer the hirings as we talked about, and that would include the two police officers too
I
as
just
well.
changed the motion to 2%. Okay. So we don't have to go to 0%. Okay.
Let Bob finish
I
his
I think
explanation.
the
No, he's going to explain the difference between 2 and 0.
I'd like to hear your explanation.
Oh, don't. We don't need it.
I'd like to hear.
we may not need it, but the public could benefit from it, and the manager wants to tell us, he should tell us. Please speak, Bob.
I speak to the motion on the floor. There's a 2% motion for 2%.
There's no second.
I would like to hear what you have to say, Bob.
Second.
Second. There's a second on that.
There we go.
Speak to the 2% that's on the floor.
The issue is trying to address, the concern of the 0% and trying to come up with a way. I think at least I would be entitled to that courtesy to be able to speak about 0%. By deferring, the police officers and deferring some of the other hirings as we talked about here, and trying to wrangle in some other costs here, to get to 0, I think we can do that. But there's got to be that understanding that that day is coming in the future here, that decisions are going to have to be made. There's no way we can keep pushing and deferring this to somebody else. That's going to have to happen. But if this brings a consensus here to be able to do this and deferring some of those, I think we can get there. So the issue is with the 0, with the understanding, but also the deferral of those hiring.
Well, I'm not going to defer. I'm not going to
defer.
defer police officer. Okay. I was deferring the economic development person.
That's part of it, deferring that position, deferring the inspector back to second quarter. You've got all those factored in there.
Yeah.
I think as we talk about the police officer, there will probably defer those back to second quarter. Can we make that work? If that's the charge of the board, we'll make that work and we'll get that to it, knowing that you've got this schedule here.
All right.
You're
We'll
gonna
talk
have
about
to
the
go to.
2% motion. Okay. We're at a 2% motion now.
The 2% actually comes down to is the deferral of just the housing inspector back to the second quarter and the economic development manager back to the third quarter. But to defer that based on the hiring schedule and that we can get there. So.
Well, my response to Commissioner Spingler's, what I would like, I'd like to use Wednesday to have staff provide us more details and then get feedback from constituents. I'm not sure we can't do 0% yet, so that would be my preference. Wednesday is set up for that, correct, Bob?
Well,
Don will just tell you, if you want to do 0, we'll get to 0.
Yeah.
Based on these
Yeah,
deferrals,
but I need to
we'll
know
get there.
more details than just what's discussed tonight. I know you can get to 0. I know you can get to any number, and I want to better understand the details of what happens when we get to that number.
We'll have you those on the 12th.
okay. Well, I'm going to make
So
it.
the
I'm going to
12th.
make it easy because I'm not going to defer the housing inspector, and my good friend Hank Mahoney isn't here, and I have a good idea he'll vote. So in the spirit of everything, I'll vote I'll make a motion for a 3% tax increase as recommended by the manager. Yeah, second.
I'll second that.
Back to what you voted against?
Well, no, Hank deserves a vote, and he's going to be here, and we're going to change it anyway, so we might as well
Well,
just
I
do it
just want to
now.
understand, because your first motion was 2%. Now you just changed it to...
Well, because I thought we could get the housing inspector for a full year. I went to housing inspector for a full year.
Let's call the
'Cause
question.
I love John Fisher.
Oh, actually, I have to have public comment.
So we're going back to the original motion, which will vote either 4-2 or 4-1.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we're back to the original.
Original motion.
I will allow brief public comment because we're actually back to where we were 20 minutes ago, and nothing's changed except that we said a few things.
I appreciate Jim Schneller, St. David's Park. I appreciate Mr. Curley's comment that there's much room for review and for taking another look at the figures. We wish you would, rather than having large chunks of cash quickly applied to this situation or that by way of this idea or that. Could you please conference on this? Not have it, John, your point is well taken, the code officer situation, and Kevin's comment, the code officer situation being contracted out could be well adjusted. But if you could kindly not jump to a 2% right off the bat. Don't forget, what really gets our respect is if you don't increase it. These are tough economic times. This is not a year, and you've deferred, and that's commendable. But sometimes deferral has to keep happening. And we know that you can juggle much better than this. And it is tough. And we appreciate your talents.
Thank you. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Just which one are we voting on? We're voting on,
We're-
there's a motion
yeah.
out there that was seconded that we never voted on.
Well, yeah, we're withdrawing that motion.
Okay, that motion's withdrawn by the person who moved for it. The current motion on the table is for the 3.7511 mils tax rate and a sewer rate of $5.74 per 1,000 gallons. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-2. Thank you.
John, I'd like to, before we move off of this, make another motion.
Okay?
I'd like to move that we direct or ask staff to do a preliminary draft of a resolution that would commit surplus fund balance that we have over the 15% targeted set aside to be earmarked and transferred to the capital improvement fund and the long-term employment liability needs.
Isn't that what the meetings are about in January, February, March, and April, to decide how we're going to do that?
I support,
I
I'll
would
second
like
the
to do-
motion.
to do it
I'll
now.
second the motion.
You don't have to decide tonight. Let's
Because
have
we
it.
can revise it
Right.
in January,
Mhm.
but, we were supposed to have a stormwater meeting this month, and that hasn't happened either. So just in case we don't.
And we
don't
also,
get to
last
it.
year at this point, when we
And
saw
this
surplus.
doesn't cost anything.
No, we saw a surplus. We talked about putting $700,000 to OPEB, but we never did. When we're here, when we're talking about the budget, and when we're passing it, I think this is the time to really commit to a set aside. So, that's my motion.
Okay, any board comment?
Sure, I just would like to hear, I don't fully understand what it means, but Bill, could you explain do you have an opinion on it, what they've just presented? And Bob, same thing.
Well, I guess my initial reaction is I agree that something should be done to start setting money aside. So I agree in principle. That is the intention of the meetings that were scheduled for next year. So, perhaps the draft could be put together now and then discussed at those meetings, or if you want to see it earlier, we can do that. I guess that's where I get confused, is that's the intention for capital for January, and I think the other long-term liabilities were scheduled for February. We could have those drafts ready to be reviewed in those months for consideration by the board then.
Meetings will be discussing what we're going to fund, how we're going to fund.
Yeah.
We need the money set aside. And,
Well, it's there.
well, it's not there if we don't set it aside.
Well, that's when we set it aside.
Well-
This is just, this is just a knee-jerk posturing reaction. I think we ought to have the discussion. You could sit there and leave it sitting in the general fund and not spend it. What you want to do ultimately is fund it and put it in some kind of escrow fund that you can't get your hands on. So I think we just wait to have the discussion to figure out what's the right way to go about doing this, whether it's the capital, whether it's the OPEB. To just have a knee-jerk reaction is just pandering, in my opinion.
We had this exact same discussion last year about funding OPEB with our $700,000 surplus, and nothing ever happened. So I would like to, the reason I feel strongly about this is because we, in passing this budget with this surplus, need to make the commitment that that's what this surplus is going to go toward.
It's not surplus, it's a fund balance.
Surplus over
No.
the
Yeah,
15%.
well, we have a requirement under the
excess.
current.
We can use the word excess.
Elaine, under the current ordinance, resolution that we have, actually ordinance in the administrative code, we are not allowed to carry more than 18%. And the target has been set at 15%. So anything, you're saying anything over 15%, we should earmark for capital and the OPEB expenses. I think it's a good idea, and I think we should do it now. It'll set the tone for next year, and we'll have the staff develop those documents. Do you have a sense of when you'd like to see the document?
Well, I'd like to see it in conjunction with us passing this budget. But,
Bill just fell off his chair.
All right, well, let's call sense to the board instead of discussing this for 2 hours. Are there 4 votes in favor of doing this?
No, I mean, my sense is that this is what we're going to get in January and henceforth, and as long as we don't spend the money, we're good, so.
So we don't have 4 votes, so we don't have to discuss it forever.
Should I call the question?
Yes.
We'll
Yeah.
kill it. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
John, were you voting on that?
It doesn't matter to me either.
Okay, it fails. Motion fails. 4-2, fails.
No. 3 to 2 to 1.
3-2,
3-2, that's
fails.
first base to the pitcher to the
Yep.
catcher.
Who's the ever's the champ.
Okay, at this point, Kevin Higgins, you want to do item F?
Yep. Item F is the introduction of the ordinance 2011-27, which is the 2012 consolidated fee schedule. I think most of the fees were not increased. I think we talked about the one that was in there. There was an increase. Is there anything else in there? Okay, so I make a motion to approve.
Introduce, I'll second.
I'd like to move to amend it to take out, or to put a hold on the field fee, of $10 field fee.
Do I have a second on that amendment?
I'll second that. And I'm assuming, Elaine, that the idea is until we can resolve
Right.
what next
Right.
year's going to look like
See what next year's, get input from the people this is going to affect,
and know what's happening with the school.
and know what's going to happen moving forward with the whole landscape of our field usage, our sports groups' field usage.
Any board comment?
Yes, one
Yeah,
comment.
this is on-
Not about Elaine's,
Well, only about the motion. We're going to vote on the
only
motion.
about Elaine's or
Yes,
about the?
only about Elaine's.
Very good.
Public comment.
Okay, I'll just comment. I think the fee should be in there. It should have been in there last year. I think a $10 fee is nominal. My kids played hockey, and the costs were about $1,000 a year per kid.
Well,
Just
this
for
isn't the
just-
only fee these kids are going to have.
I understand that. There are 5,000 youth that play soccer in this township, and the coaches are paid. They're paid coaches. So they're paying, the 5,000 kids that play soccer.
John, I think it's 1,500.
I believe the number is
No,
5,000.
Jim
It might be a
Riley's.
total program. That's all right.
1,500. Okay, I apologize.
All right.
There
So
might be 5,000
So
kids in all
1,500 kids are
forms of
playing
sport.
soccer. They're paying for professional coaching. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was told the coaches are paid.
Well,
Is
let's
that
not
not
get into
true?
paid coaching, John.
There are paid coaches.
Yep,
Okay.
some of the travels.
So I think, let's keep this in context. Most parents are going to spend $10 a week driving their kids to those games. So $10 a year versus $10 a week in gas. This is a moot point to me. I think everyone's got to pay their fair share. Everyone's got to carry their weight. I don't think the $10 fee is a big deal. I'm sure it's a big deal to some, and we'll do what we can on scholarships to try to reduce that. We'll continue to do what we introduced a new policy in terms of sponsorships of our fields.
Okay,
and
John, the
naming of our
motion
fields.
is not going to pass. Let's just vote.
Okay.
You know?
Any public comment on the current motion? To pull the $10 fee out? I'm sorry, on the amendment to the motion. Okay, seeing no public comment. Okay. Oh.
Go ahead.
You look confused.
Yeah, Jim Riley, 9 Meadowwood Road, Rosemont. I like John Osborne's suggestion of a donation. Little League, which has donated money in the past to build things, even would like to help out with the comfort station at Emlenton L. You'll probably end up getting more money that way than the $10 fee. Just something to think about. Thanks.
Okay, those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
That's 2. Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed? 4. Motion, the amendment fails.
I had
We're
one.
back to our original
Yeah,
motion.
one question about the main ordinance. Bob, why not, if we had an increase in labor costs, and most of the items or many of these items reflect labor done by staff, why not increase these items by roughly 3% also, to reflect the 3% increase in staff costs?
We can if you're suggesting that.
And we could do that at the meeting in December too, because that would be a small.
But you
Like you could tell us, you could selectively, you could identify the applicable ones and tell us how much revenue we would generate.
We could, but if you adopt this as is, you can go back and by resolution amend it later in the year.
I mean,
So
we could
you
even amend it in December though. Like tonight, I'm not prepared to come and say this one should be 23 instead of 30, but I'd like a sense of what would happen if we went through here and we identified the ones that are labor intensive from the perspective of staff and increased them modestly.
You guys aren't in favor of that, right?
Sure, we can do that.
Well, let's see if you have any support on the board or it's just yourself.
Okay, good idea.
Okay, anyone else agree with Don? He wants to raise all the fees
No.
3%.
Some of the fees, the ones that are staff intensive. So when someone submits a permit application that that staff has to review, and we charge them $20, maybe we should charge them $23. And if we had a 3%, an increase in staff costs associated with what we're paying staff.
Yeah.
Well, give me some room on the numbers here.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish they were 20. I
Bob,
wish.
or Bill, I mean, you could have done that when you made the proposal. There must have been logic as to why you didn't do that.
They reviewed, the staff reviews all
That's
these
what I'm
fees,
asking.
and we've
There were
raised them in the
there were
past.
some adjustments made last year, which we think are good for carrying through for this year.
All right, well, is there a sense that, I mean, if
Yeah,
Bill's right, if there's no
Yeah,
one.
there's no one else is supporting it, Don.
Very good.
Okay. No, we can
All
talk
right.
all night, but, if you don't have the votes.
We have a motion on the table, ordinance 2011-27, the fee schedule. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? I offered public comment already. On this,
You can let.
There was public.
yeah, you can come up.
There was public comment already.
There was.
Yeah, we have
There-
public-
On this
Gentlemen-
exact motion, there was already.
Yeah, I think Jim Schneller's right.
No,
Fee schedule.
No, this is the whole fee schedule.
Okay,
Vote.
you know what? Let's err on the side of caution. Jim, come on up, because Commissioner,
But don't talk about world order. This is
this is the
consolidated
fee
fee right
schedule.
here,
I thought you liked that.
Well, I didn't want to be king, so,
I simply have a comment that I think is in need of correction. I wouldn't waste your time. On page 11, you have an application fee for a challenge to validity of an ordinance. Now, this is the citizen's only right to petition this government for redress. This is the only chance for a citizen to come in and challenge an ordinance as far as land use. It's at $7,500. You'll see there's no other fee that matches that except for 3 spaces down, the curative amendment. And I addressed this comment to that also.
Well, do you know we incur legal fees to defend that?
Well, those types of challenges tend to be lengthy. There's a lot of costs involved in those types of challenges, whether it's before the zoning hearing board or it comes before the Board of Commissioners as a curative amendment.
Well, the citizen also would incur the fees. If it got, the farther it goes, isn't it true that citizen or whoever decides to challenge the ordinance will pay an equal amount of fees?
It's $7,500 to file
But John,
that
wouldn't
kind of
the,
an application.
if the person prevailed, they would recoup the money they spent, right?
No, they would not.
No?
No.
No, but if it was unfounded, you could go after them for fees. So,
Careful what you say.
I have a question.
Exactly.
Jim, one moment. Have we ever had a challenge under this occur?
Not as long as I've been here, but I'll give you some close examples. All the billboard cases that are occurring in the other municipalities that have been going on for years. So you incur the cost of court reporters, the room rentals, the board members, the advertising, and, those types of cases, I suspect the ones that are going on they've been going on for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So $7,500 in those types of cases is probably not enough.
All right.
yes, but isn't that assuming not to drag on, but isn't that assuming a non-level ground where there's some kind of instant assumed responsibility or assumption that the citizen is in the wrong from the start? If an ordinance is defective, and it happens all the time, and by the way, the billboard issue is a mushrooming issue. I mean, a citizen could feasibly come in here because he's had a $10,000 loss in value to his property, and the whole thing would be taken care of in one session. So the billboard thing is an astronomical estimate.
And anybody that thinks that fee is excessive has the right to come in and challenge the fee at the hearing. If the hearing's 1 hour, they have the right to raise that in front of the board. That's usually what happens.
Yeah.
So it's not as if you've got to pay it up front, but the board can then rule on whether or not it's an appropriate fee.
Well, I'm sorry, but I see a definite contradiction with my rights to seek proper government, and I wish you would reduce it. I note that the second from bottom line is intermunicipal transfer liquor license, and they are that could easily compensate, whereas with a $7,500 fee, you're not gaining anything. You're not making money. So you're essentially deterring people's right to come in here. So would you please consider $5,000?
Thank you, Jim.
Any further public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-1.
That's it for finance and audit, but I have a question now. Are we meeting Wednesday or not?
No.
Okay.
So the special BOC meeting dated Wednesday, November 30th at 7 p.m. is now officially canceled.
Yeah.
Canceled. We will be meeting December
12th.
5th
The
and
next
12th.
two Mondays are meetings, I believe, if I
Yeah,
recall. the
December
calendar
5th
correctly.
and 12th, and we will be adopting the budget most likely on the 12th.
The hearing will be on the fee schedule, and the budget will be on for hearing on the 12th.
Okay.
Public Works and Engineering, there's nothing on the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Spengler. Public Safety,
There's
anybody
nothing
have
on the
anything?
agenda.
I know. Parks and Recreation, Commissioner Nagel. Any report, anything?
Just remind people that check out the online information. A lot of good things coming up. Holidays at the Willows is a real blast. Is that the 11th, Tammy?
It's on Sunday, December 11th,
Yeah.
yes.
So I heartily encourage people to take their kids out to that one. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Commissioner Curley, Community Development. Thank you. Commissioner Schaefer, Library.
Report.
Thank you. I have nothing under Public Health. Any old business? Any new business?
Yeah, I have a meeting to announce. The Open Space Committee will be holding a meeting on Tuesday, December 6th from 7 to 8. No, from 6 to 7 in the Powys room. And that is not a public meeting.
And I have an announcement here. The Radnor Fire Company and the Radnor Fire Company Auxiliary present Breakfast with Santa, Radnor Firehouse, Sunday, December 11th, 8 a.m. to noon. So if you want to meet Santa and have a great breakfast, go to the firehouse between 8 a.m. and noon on Sunday, December 11th. You get your picture taken with Santa. It's great.
I have one item. This is actually old business. I apologize. The SEPTA Spillway, Rock Slope. We received a $10,000 grant 3 years ago. It's about to expire. Can we look into that, see if we can buy $10,000 worth of wildflowers for that site? Instead of losing the money, let's buy a lot of wildflowers.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, given all the construction that's taken place, if the board would have no objection, we'd like to approach PICO as well as SEPTA to actually contribute towards that restoration of that entire area, in which they've done a nice job at disrupting the area.
No argument here, but we do lose that funding from the state, and I think we need to spend that money, and all we need to do is make sure that we can use it to buy materials that will be used at the site.
Well, Commissioner, I'll check, but I believe we have an extension on that grant until June, so we do have it
Can
until
you please
June.
verify that? Maybe
I will,
send a copy of that to me.
Yep.
If that's the case, I appreciate the hard work on that. Thank you. Public participation.
Move we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.